Tanga side of the Jubilee faction, they seem to have an accusatory tone on everything and sort of suggesting, I don't know if they watch too much 24 and series like that, House of Cards, suggesting people met in a hotel. And
it's always a hotel. Where there's an assassination about to happen, it's in a hotel.
And these people do have homes they could meet in privately, but it's hotels that the Tanga side.
I'll be raising this issue of what we saw in Kibra in a conversation later today.
The violence?
The violence, the rhetoric. The rhetoric coming out of that, and politicians coming out to basically behave the same way that they behave all the time. And what does this mean as we head towards 2022 in terms of how we're preparing for elections? You're talking about electoral malpractice that has been reported. We had a candidate here last week, and you talked about some incidences of electoral malpractice. The accusations of voter bribery, accusations of violence, and politicians just going all out and talking about it instead of following the proper procedure.
But worth noting, the ODM sort of people didn't complain because they won. So
yes.
In keeping with their tendencies, isn't it? If it hadn't gone their way, there would have been a court case.
If we say tendencies, the other side's tendencies in this matter were never proven because they have not apparently lost. Now that they have lost, you cannot now say that it is one party's tendency. It seems to be a politician's tendency.
No. I mean, if you look at the other side, and let's call it Jubilee for now, we've had President Uhuru lose a presidential election previously, and you didn't
Under
see
Jubilee?
the sort of... no, we're talking about individuals. We know parties are individuals in this country. Whether Raila was in ODM or any other party previously, it's Raila losing. So we're talking about individuals, and we have had Uhuru lose an election, but you didn't see sort of the outcry and the tantrums that you see from different political
so
candidates.
What the candidates,
candidates.
the people who are now complaining, as we say about Kibra, you say that their complaints are
No,
empty,
it's just
and they're
worth
just causing
noting. And they had primed the ground for complaints. If you remember, their lawyer had actually gone to court demanding that the IEBC released the list of names on the registry, and they'd gone on to actually get court orders to the same effect. So you can see they were priming the ground for any court proceedings if they lost. And this, as I say, is in keeping with their practices.
What do you have, Nyeri, in your headline?
More politics. Musalia Weta Kalonzo 2022 tough options. Of course, this is following the dissolution of what we'd call NASA. Three opposition chiefs, Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula, face tough political options in 2022 following the imminent death of NASA and dwindling support in their bastions. So I don't know about dwindling support. Of course, that's a matter of it's subjective, or unless there's a survey that's been done. But the trio have all declared that they'll be gunning for the presidency in 2022. So very interesting. In that one sentence, there's already two people from a particular block. So you can see how that vote will be divided. But the poll has left little doubt that the 2022 presidential contest will be a grand match between arch rivals ODM boss Raila Odinga and Deputy President William Ruto. It's a two-horse race, I think.
It is.
As things stand, of course, we've still got, is it 3 years to 2022? Just about?
Only, just about.
Well, a day is a very long time in politics. So 365, 900 days or 1,000 odd days is an extremely long time, and it's an eternity.
2 pages on the Standard today. Page 2, page 3, the story, the man who fell from sky. Of course, this is telling us a story from Sky News. The story that was published on Sky News, also a video story on Sky News.
Pun intended.
Yeah, the man who fell from the sky. The news is about the man who fell from a Kenya Airways plane that was heading towards London, and nobody had been able to identify him. The London Metropolitan Police hadn't hit a dead end in terms of trying to identify who the man is, and Sky just did a simple investigation. They come to Kenya and they are able to identify and say the man is Mr. Manyasi. So it's a very when you read the story or you watch the video, it's actually a very well told story of how it's possible that the man he was working as a cleaner at the Nairobi JKIA. Right. He suddenly just disappeared. The people who knew him didn't see him, and then they hear of there's somebody who's fallen from the sky. They don't connect the dots, But the Sky journalist comes to JKIA, going through all the companies that operate from JKIA. None of them, of course, tells him that this is indeed somebody from who used to work here who disappeared. Until a taxi driver comes and says, well, I know of a certain company and somebody who used to work there, and I hear that they no longer work there. And then the journalist goes and interviews the people who work at this particular cleaning company, and is told, yes, a friend of ours used to work here. He's called Paul Manyasi, and we haven't seen him since. And apparently he's gone missing.
And of course, must have been a terrible shock for those in, I think it was London. Somebody's out sunbathing and a body lands 3 feet away from you. Must have been very shocking. Back to ICPD 25. Of course, this is the conference that is going on yesterday and today. But Uhuru commits to ending gender violence and child marriage by 2030. And he says Kenya will eliminate gender violence and child marriage by 2030. Uhuru also committed to increasing access to secondary and tertiary education for boys and girls. The president spoke during the International Conference on Population and Development in Nairobi yesterday. So this is an interesting one because I would actually question as to why this is a target for 2030 in terms of gender violence. I think it's something that, the target should be tomorrow. It doesn't have to be a process. This is something I think that could be instantaneous, unless, of course, with gender violence, he's talking about maybe attitudes towards women and something probably broader than my understanding of what gender violence is. It's not something that we need 10 years to eliminate. We can crack down on this. It's the equivalent of saying, by 2030 we'll have eliminated terrorism. No, we can foil attacks, we can protect ourselves from terrorism, and if we put the same zeal into making sure women are safe and don't face violence, gender-based violence, then it's something that we could actually stop immediately.
Right, for now.
City, what do you have?
What I have is very simple. Our papers are doing what they do best.
they tell the story that they always do.
They are highlighting stories that they think will sell the papers. There's the issue of the floods.
In Mombasa.
And Mombasa, more than any other place, you have a situation where it's not even just flooding, it's a deluge. And it's like Mombasa's drowning. Again, it points to the preparedness that governments, county or national, have, especially when they already know that this particular occurrence is going to happen. It looks like the drainages were blocked. It looks like there is no passage. By the time water accumulates in one place and in such quantities, it means they have nowhere to go. Any passage that they may have used to sort of like go towards the ocean or go towards parts that have been pre-prepared for them don't exist, have been blocked. In short, they were not prepared.
What's interesting is if you bought the newspaper the same, this time last year, it would have been exactly the same headlines. And the previous year would have been exactly the same headlines. So this recurrence, it's not something that people shouldn't be prepared for in terms of those that are in charge of city planning and so on. So we'll see the same headlines next year this time, no doubt.
You sort of feel certain about that, right?
Oh, I know so.
Well, yeah, the issue of flooding, and we wishing all the best to our listeners in Mombasa. Of course, they've been affected. The point is, when you have water running everywhere and also coming into your homes, it's not a good thing, no matter the circumstances. Poleni sana, we're with you. You can call us and tell us exactly where you are affected and how it's affecting you and how the local authorities are actually reacting to this. Also, we know about the fire at the Mombasa hospital last night. The entire hospital had to be evacuated. And this is also something we'll be following up on to find out exactly what happened and how the situation is this morning. Remember, you can download the Standard e-paper app from the Google Play Store and Apple App Store with just one subscription fee, and you have access to all of the Standard newspapers publications, the Standard Group's publications. Good morning, 16 minutes after 6.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. 104.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
87.9 in Mombasa, 102.5 in Kisumu, Nakuru 96.0, 96.7 in Eldoret, 90.9 Nyeri, Malindi 97.7. We live stream every morning on Facebook, Spice FM KE, and also on our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. Welcome. My name is Eric Latif. We have C.T. Muga, Jerry Thorne, Nduoko. Let's talk about Africans seeking opportunities abroad.
Well, looking at the chance to be able to work in another country, or saying, well, I want to be able to seek a better life for myself, I think it goes a little bit more than that. We've heard many times that, what hope is being offered for citizens of different countries. And just from this story that we've seen today of this young man who was actually found in June, actually fell out of the sky in June. And then the investigation was done, and then it turns out that we have the details that we have today of exactly what happened. Points to the fact, and this is one out of hundreds of thousands who are leaving their countries day after day, month after month, to try and find a better existence in other countries, passing over through the Spanish Channel, trying to get out through Tunisia, and trying to then get into Europe via Spain and France, trying to leave with the countries where they are, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars that they don't even have to try and secure a visa to get into another country, not because they want to leave their loved ones, but because in terms of providing for those same loved ones, or providing raising the profile of a livelihood that they would otherwise have, they don't. And yes, the thought of braving raging waters, getting into a boat, 40 of you getting into a boat as opposed to 15 people that should carry this boat, crossing raging waters to get into another country. The thought of taking that risk of entering into a small space and sitting there for 10 hours in minus 60 degree temperatures, over 33,000 feet. The thought of that is better than staying in your country and not being able to provide for your family or for yourself. Think about that for 1 minute. The thought of risking your life is better, or the risk of putting your own life at risk is better than staying in country and not knowing what it is that you're going to be able to eat the next month, or how it is that you're going to be able to provide for your children. And we have these individuals. We are replete with ideas. Every day, 3,000 Nigerians, for example, apply for visas to get out of Nigeria to go to other countries. We have this gentleman that we've seen now. We had to trace the story back. Sky News had to trace the story back to Kenya to find out exactly what happened. It points to the fact that, yes, there's a lot of hopelessness across countries. There are a lot of people who would rather risk their lives than to find a better existence, to find a job that's going to pay them even twice what it is that they're earning. And if you look at the details of what people are earning, 9,000, 8,000, 5,000 shillings a month, and are not able to make those provisions for themselves, we're not looking at a dire situation. We're looking at what was a dire situation 10 years ago. And it has exacerbated, and we're actually looking at something that is actually much worse than it was. And we talked about it a few weeks ago when we said, what's going to happen when people actually are tired and they don't have an option? They're going to leave. But here we are, we're saying people would rather die trying to get to the other side than remain here. And we got to look at it and say, really, we've gotten worse than we were a while back.
Are we just beating ourselves up and down over something that is a normal human thing? Migration is actually a natural human, phenomenon, so to speak. So yes, and the risk you take is the risk you take. Somebody takes the risk of, getting onto a dinghy. Another one takes the risk of stowing away on a plane. Another one on a ship. But basically, every human being is looking for a better opportunity somewhere. The rural urban migration is the same thing.
When people talk about migration, unless you tune in to international news, in the UK, over 12 bodies of people who later turned out to be Vietnamese were found dead in a container in a truck. It isn't the first time, and it isn't the first time that people have been found trying to move either from Southeast Asia or the former Eastern European countries into Europe. Mainland Europe, as in not just Britain, mainland. Now, it isn't strange. It happens all the time. In fact, a lot of the problems that, say, a country like Britain is now facing is that there are many people who come from the former so-called Eastern Europe who want to migrate, whether it's Germany, whether it is England, whether it is France. So what is highlighted is the number of blacks who want to cross the sea to get to Europe. That is what is highlighted. Even as we speak right now, one of the problems that is arguably causing, it's not even quite momentous issues in Hong Kong, is that 90% of any of the immigration that have come into Hong Kong over the last year or so have been from mainland China. People who are not originally from Hong Kong. And they now argue that they comprise 15% of the population of Hong Kong currently. Now, 15% is enough, that demographic is enough to change many things within a country. So, Eric, to answer the question that you asked, it is a human phenomenon. But when it is the Africans crossing, it is highlighted.
It becomes news.
It becomes very big news. And it should, because part of the reason is because the areas you find many people moving from, people are not happy. Either it's they are not content with economic circumstances, but in many of those countries, you'll find they tend to be Francophone Africa. Those countries are not unstable. Those countries are at war and have been for a long, long time.
Really struggling in terms of even an economy.
Yes, and so there's no, you cannot see light even in the distant future. There's no tunnel to see any light through. So they want to move. They're talking about them moving into Europe. Do they know into how many other African countries these immigrants actually go to as well? Very recently, Rwanda allowed some African immigrants to come and stay in their country. What about Kenya and the refugee camps? People think the refugees in Kenya come from Sudan or Somalia. No, they don't. They come from all over this continent.
Yep.
So you're talking about people moving because of strife. It happens all the time, and it's happening all over the world.
And seeking opportunity.
Yes, exactly. Why is it that America has tightened their rules about immigration? Why? Because right across the border, you have the Mexicans. But beyond the Mexicans, there are other Latin American countries. People now know that you don't go through Mexico directly. There are people whose business it is to charter routes to get people into America. It's a human phenomenon.
There's different types of refugees, economic migrants, people looking for greener pastures, which is what I suppose the stowaway was doing. I doubt he knew the risk he was taking in terms of the hypothermia and the sort of technicalities with the wheels coming in, that he could be crushed to death. I don't think he thought it that far. He discounted or he wasn't aware of the likelihood of his death. So I doubt it's a risk that, he decided, I'm willing to risk my death in order to get better economic prospects. But you also have the brain drain. So there's some people who go there with visas, and what you're doing is, there's very well educated and people who could be very beneficial to our economy and our society, who perhaps because of better opportunities, i.e. pay and perhaps lifestyle and security of job, schools, access to healthcare and so on, decide to leave the country. And then of course you have actual refugees who, because of turmoil in their country or political tensions and so on, they actually leave the country. Now, of course, these countries are bound by a convention relating to refugees, a 1951 convention. They're bound to take in asylum seekers, as we call them. They're bound to take in refugees. But once you hit the land,
once you arrive.
So once you arrive, they have to. And they've tightened the noose and the rules, and immigrants don't have the same rights. If you're applying for asylum, you'll find that you have to stay in a camp initially. You don't have the right to work initially, although they do give you a small stipend to ensure that you have, food and shelter. So they've tried to make it as difficult as possible. But what's interesting, if you look at this refugee convention, it started off as a very noble idea to encourage actually communists to move from the Eastern Bloc, and then of course to take in Jews after the Holocaust. So it was actually encouraged. It wasn't something as stringent and robust as we see today. I don't think they envisaged Africans actually relying on this 1951 convention forcing countries to take in refugees. Of course, once you see black people coming in, they've changed the Immigration and Asylum Act a number of times, tried to find loopholes, but because of course they're a party to this 1951 Convention on Refugees, they still have to take them. So they do their utmost best to prevent refugees from
Up to and including not recognizing them as refugees from the very beginning. Like if you look at the immigration crisis in Europe, we are calling it that, immigration crisis, because that's how Europe described it. Illegal immigrants attempting to cross over Greece and coming into Europe. They were refugees. Basically, people from Syria.
They were referring to Africans.
Yeah, even the people from Syria as well. And you're going that and saying and saying ISIS is trying to send its sleeper cells through human traffickers into Europe. So let's have stringent ways of dealing with these illegal immigrants. Never, not even once, were they declared what they called refugees until certain media houses started saying, "No, look, we are not going to be referring to these people as illegal immigrants, as the Western media is doing. So we're going to be calling them refugees, people seeking refuge in Europe, and asylum seekers." And that's what Al Jazeera started doing. And actually now it became another global communication and conversation.
Well, I think also at the same time we can't ignore the fact that a lot of people who leave country, whether they have, the wherewithal to do it, and those who don't, are actually leaving a situation that they feel that they are not able to handle anymore. And really, it's not even about greener pastures. They're looking for a more comfortable situation. I'll look at some of the exposés that were done about Nigeria.
Those are greener pastures.
Well, yeah, I mean, but in this, yes, greener pastures, but to even look at the exposés that were done about the Nigerians who would constantly, and then now when Canada opened its borders and basically said, come, the exodus can only be described as mass. And because here you are, and then 3/4 of the time there's no power, there's no water, you don't have a job, and these are people who are educated in the country. You have a degree or two, but you can't get a job, and then maybe you survive on something like 30,000 naira a month, which is really not much, and you don't even know where you're getting it from that until the next day. So here you have an opportunity, and somebody says, you know what, when you get to the other side, you have constant power. Here's an opportunity for you to have a job that's going to provide you with money that you would not ordinarily have.
You live in a proper house.
This exactly. You live in a proper house with water and sanitation, and you have some kind of structure. That's all. They're not even asking to be millionaires. They're just asking to be able to raise the profile of how live better. The sea is not an obstacle. You see what I'm saying? The sea is not what? We need to cross the sea to be able to get there? No problem. We'll do it. And many people have said that. And people are taking children. People are, and the same can be applied because you have somebody who's sitting in an office, maybe who does have the wherewithal to cross. Still, the desire to have a better life or green pastures is still something that then is common across the board. So the desire to leave to get something better is still there. It is something that is a reality. It is something that is true. Aside from refugees and asylum seekers, even people who do have normal, as it were, 8 to 5 jobs, looking for opportunity to be able to do better or to have
get out
better
of where they are,
is still something that is real for very many people.
Yeah, I think there's also, of course, programs for skilled migrants where these countries do encourage immigrants to come in. But what's interesting, of course, is when Africans are in the UK, they're called migrants. When we have these guys here, they're expats. So some of this framing is very interesting in terms of how these people are then regarded and treated as humans, rather, as I was going to say citizens, but of course they're not citizens. But I think from my personal observation and nothing more, there's no statistics to back this up. I remember in the Moi era, there was this massive brain drain and there was this drive to go abroad. Of course, the West does sell the rags to riches story, the opportunity story, anybody can make it, especially the US, for instance. And then we saw a decline in that drive to leave the country during the Kibaki years. I think the economy was booming. There was a lot of opportunities. In fact, you had the reverse. Absolutely. You had people who were moving back, Kenyans who perhaps had been political refugees. Of course, the space to express yourself was widening and you could express yourself more freely. So as a political refugee, you could come back, and dissent wasn't, sort of jailed in the Kibaki years. So you had that, and you also had people who perhaps gone abroad to study. They were looking to come back, and there were opportunities. But recently, and very recently, I'm talking about in the last sort of 2-3 years, I sense that now people are looking to get out. We had a caller about a month month ago, and he was talking about applying for his American visa because the economy is just too tough for him. So we might start to see a drive back to this sort of economic refugee ship. Sadly, the receiving countries aren't as open as they previously were, because of course for something like, let's say, the UK, with having opened up the borders under EU law, they've had immigrants come in from Poland and former sort of Eastern Bloc. So in terms of work, they're blaming it on refugees, the fact that there's work lacking, so they're not looking to take in refugees. So there might not be as many opportunities as, let's say, in the 80s and 90s.
We're discussing the Africans seeking opportunities abroad, basically, right? We're focusing on Africans and looking at it from the point of why is it that so many of us are looking to go there, out here, taking a risk.
It's not just Africans.
We're focusing on Africa.
The vast majority of the people who are being referred to are ordinary citizens. People who have people who have abilities that may be considered to be in demand. Abilities that the so-called immigrant receiving countries consider valuable. They don't fall into the category. They don't go into boats and they are not stowaways. They actually board planes and actually head in that direction. And they're even welcome to stay there. There's a category of person, irrespective of where you come from, who will be welcomed into these countries. It is the ordinary person who will end up doing the menial work, whose qualifications those host countries probably also have in abundance and don't really even know what to do with. So the significance is that they are probably able to work for less. We've taken this story far. Let's go to the Middle East here.
Let's do that when you take a look at traffic. It's 27 minutes to 7 o'clock. This is a situation room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
It's a wet and slippery Wednesday morning, and we're asking you already at the drop of the hat, rather, to drive safely and take care on the roads, because it's quite something. People have left quite early this morning after seeing what was happening yesterday. And there's already been a traffic alert that was issued yesterday telling us that to be aware of the conference that's taking place in the center of the city, namely at KICC. So we have quite a lot of people entering into the city center from different parts of the city. So that's going to cause traffic again this morning. So you must be prepared for that. And you were asking what the issue was on Langata Road yesterday. Fortunately, one of our dignitaries left late, and so there was traffic that was held up on both sides. So you might want to leave early today. We're already seeing signs that Thika Road and Langata Road are already building up. So there's quite some traffic that will be felt in the city today as well. Looking across at Mombasa today, because of the flooding, a lot of the roads have been affected. That means you're going to be moving a little bit slower today. So please take some caution while you're moving around the town of Mombasa, the city of Mombasa. Take it easy, you'll get there. But remember, there's a lot more water than there was some time ago. So there will be some more traffic as well. We'll let you know what's happening on other major roads as we see more action. 0719-012-600 is the number to call. Let us know.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Our Twitter hashtag is The Situation Room. We're also live streaming on YouTube, Spice FM KE, and our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. We are discussing immigration issues and why, coming off the story of the Kenyan who fell from London skies. Headline story on the Standard this morning, which is taking the story from Sky News, which identified Paul Manyasi as the Kenyan who was a stowaway, fell off a Kenya Airways a plane that was heading to London Heathrow, and he fell onto a homestead in the UK, in London. And now Nduokwa is saying, look, this is just one case. If you look across Africa, you see so many stories and so many cases of people who are seeking opportunity outside the continent or even within the continent. If you look at the people who actually are caged in Libya, just seeking to get an opportunity to get out of Africa. So they've been trafficked through their countries into Libya. They are put in a cage, and even Al Jazeera did a big story on that. Put in a cage, and they're just waiting for that opportunity to get onto that dinghy.
right, and then
cross
to be able
the
to cross.
Mediterranean.
And all they want to do is get to the other side, because then there's some kind of hope that they receive, that they're given, to say that, okay, what it is that you've left behind, you will never have to taste that. You will never have to have that again, because then you will now have a job, and then you will have an opportunity to put 3 meals a day on the table, feed your children, send them to school, whatever that may be. But it is the fact, and we can't run away from it, that people are running away from something to something else. In terms of the opportunities, we're not able to then provide for everyone, and then
Is this a failure
then somebody must leave to be able to find it.
Where is the failure? You get to a point where even families are contributing to actually send one of them out. So that you go and chart the path for the rest of us to follow you, or you send us money back. This is a big thing, and it's happening not just in Kenya, not in Tanzania, east, west, north, Southern
the failures
Africa.
in the governments, for whatever reason, we discussed yesterday France's foreign policy and how they ensure that there's no development and these countries remain impoverished. That's actually a typical example when the economy is not doing well. It's the lack of opportunities that actually drive people. Very few people want to leave their homes.
And their loved ones.
Absolutely, very few people. But the sad thing is, I don't think they're aware of the dangers that they face. So even getting onto these dinghies and crossing the Mediterranean and so on, it's not something that they would then watch in the news later. It might be published in European countries, and we might get glimpses of it if you have a TV. A lot of these migrants come from very unfortunate or poor backgrounds, so it's not that they would have been exposed to the dangers. So they may be, perhaps it's not a matter of life over greener opportunities. They see the greener pastures rather. But just some statistics here. According to the International Organization for Migrants, or for Migration, up to 3,072 people died or disappeared. Actually, sorry, that's the previous year. In 2018, which is the latest statistics, it's 4,500 migrants died across the world trying to get to the land of opportunities. So perhaps the governments of these countries actually need to start educating people. It's something we, for instance, need to do in Kenya. We've seen a lot of stories about the torture and abuse that some of our fellow Kenyans face in Middle Eastern countries, and there's always videos every now and again going around, people crying out for help. They've gone there as a maid, had their passports taken away, and they face, or they've been subjected to ill treatment, some violence sometimes. So maybe the government has a duty to educate its people, as well as to, yes, it sounds
Educate
like opportunities, just to give people information as to, for instance, you do see individuals, members of the public, trying to warn our girls who go there as domestic workers, saying, no, it's not all that it's promised
Not all rosy.
to be. Absolutely.
But you know what? I think, I bet you, a huge percentage of those that end up still seeking these opportunities, they've heard the stories. But they're saying, I'm willing to take the risk. Because they also
so maybe
know,
they discount the possibility of it happening.
And that's what I'm saying.
They also
the
know
thought
of
of
somebody
remaining
who-
here, the thought of remaining here and then continuing to live in that existence, that fear supersedes the fear of the risk that they are already aware of. And that, for me, is what is worrying. That you would say, look, whether I would go there and maybe live a torturous life, whatever would happen to me, but at least I'm earning something that I wouldn't earn here. And really, the thought of being now able to earn and then provide, that just, it kind of overpowers any risk or overpowers any kind of pain that they would have to go through to get there. And people have said this time without number, that it's okay, it'll be just for a little while, but then I'll be able to have something that I and my family can then depend on, and they're willing to take the risk.
For the longest time, house help by definition in this country was usually a poorer relative and somebody who's under the age of 18. And for many people, it was considered normal.
It was an opportunity.
Yes, exactly. Now, Saudi, if you grew up at the coast, you understood it was a place people knew you would get work. The issue of passports being taken, it was standard. In this country, people take IDs of their house help.
Yeah.
A photocopy.
No, ID.
Proper original ID.
They take
And
them
they
away
keep
from
it.
you?
Yes.
Well, they keep it. On the day you're leaving, they give it back
They
to
give
you.
it back to you.
Okay.
Yes. Now, the problem, the Middle East changed when Bangladeshis started going to the Middle East. Kenyans had that turf for the longest time. They're the ones they're nearer. The reason was Bangladeshis were willing to accept infinitely less than the Kenyans, and they were willing to do much more. So the landscape changed. there was more supply than there was demand.
Would the issue of colour have come into it, and that perhaps people preferred to employ the Bangladeshi, perhaps because of their colour, as nannies and so on?
No, it wasn't colour, it's religion. Most of the Bangladeshis happened to be Muslim, but the majority of Kenyans who also went to the Middle East were also Muslim.
Right.
From the coast.
And they didn't have the melanin that I have. They were of a fairer complexion, even fairer than the Bangladeshis.
This is what I'm asking. These are the Kenyans that went there were fair
so I'm saying
complexion.
that actually isn't it. Not quite. Because there were people who would work in construction sites, there were people who work in domestic settings. I know of students whom I taught who went to work in the Middle East, and there were no stories whatsoever of any suffering. Every year they came home, some of them depending on the level of education they had when they went there.
They were doing well.
In fact, that's the whole point. That's why it was popular.
So what are you saying? The stories that we hear of people being subjected to torture, those are few and far between, and it's a rare case, and there's still
I am saying
opportunities for
that there has
Kenyans?
been a change.
All right.
It wasn't always that way. There's been a change because more people than ever before are going there, and more people who perhaps are needier. Essentially this, when you have a situation where the supply, as I put it, outstrips the demand, then the whole dynamics of that particular sector changes.
Well, maybe it's just that now it's actually reported, whereas previously it was going on, but we didn't have mobile phones to record some of these incidents. People couldn't get in touch, if they had maybe they don't have mobile phones. And the news,
also, we report the negatives, right? And the people who are going know of cases that are positive. So you find that somebody in this village knows of somebody who went, and this is what they've done. They've been able to buy a plot. They've been able to send money to build a house. And
not just a house, houses,
a block of apartments.
Yeah, so the thing is that they're able to do something.
Take the risk.
They're able to do, exactly. Able to wanting to take the risk, and they're able then to do something that they would not ordinarily be able to do if they remained here. And just look at the green card lottery, for example. 442,966 Kenyans applied for the green card in the fiscal year 2018, and it's likely to rise this year. So you still
how many got the green card?
Well, I don't know.
I
don't know how many got it.
Right.
But you have 500,000 Kenyans applying for that to be able to have the opportunity to go and then make a life for yourself outside of Kenya. They're not going there because they want to go on holiday. They're not going there because they want to experience the United States.
The reality of the stories that we hear, whether it's the UK or whether it is the US, a good number of our citizens who go to these countries work in old people's homes. That's what the reports tell us. They look for work that the citizens of those countries would not want to be involved in. Our people have no problem with that sort of work.
That's what I'm saying, but still pays them more money that they would
It
not
them
get here.
Infinitely more money.
Also,
So that's what I'm saying.
In
We're
Western
looking
countries, you'll find there's a minimum wage.
Yes.
Irregardless
Yes.
of whatever job you're doing. But perhaps the government could step in and actually try and regulate this migration to protect our people. So, for instance, you'll find, I think it was the Philippines, they had an agreement with the UK to supply nurses. So it's actually an export in terms of human resources. So perhaps if it was better structured, if we're going to provide domestic help, domestic workers to the Middle East, to the United Arab Emirates.
Go through formal
It's actually structured so that there's better regulation, there's a safety net for the Kenyans, and there's more liaison between the Kenyan embassies and representatives in those countries, because usually when you see these videos doing the rounds, it's a cry out for help. Somebody's trying to get a message out. They can't communicate. So if the government structured this better so that it's actually an agreement with the country for, it's an export, it's a human resource that we're exporting, maybe it's something they need to consider.
The government has tried to do that. There are talks between the Kenyan Foreign Affairs Ministry and, of course, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on how to regulate people going there.
And Qatar as
even
well.
Qatar, having the organizations that are recruiting people here registered. But you know what? All the regulation becomes a stumbling block, a barrier. So the people who are
and that the
seeking
government should
employees,
own that process, as opposed to licensing the brokers
somebody else.
and the agencies that take people
barrier.
there. The government actually owns the process.
It
So in the
becomes a
same
barrier.
way, in the Philippines, the government agreed with the UK, we're going to send you X amount of nurses. I think Zimbabwe at one point had the same relationship with the UK. There was an influx of Zimbabwean nurses into the NHS. So I'm sure that was properly agreed on. There weren't private agencies sending people people. It would have been a scheme that is designed by the two governments,
For skilled
which ensures
labour,
yes, and we can consider this skilled labor, for lack of a better word, in that of course it's a needed and it's a much desired skill. People don't want to do this type of
You
work.
see, governments will do that and it will also work. But remember, there are people who derive their livelihood from forming agencies.
From
that
sending
provide
people
this.
there.
Yes.
Essentially the middleman in this kind of thing, right?
Legally.
Absolutely.
It's a business.
But
it's a business.
given the sort of pitfalls and dangers that our people are facing, and the potential for things to go wrong, and the fact that the people who've sent you there, these agencies, take no responsibility whatsoever once you've landed. They take your money and they don't care for your welfare thereafter. Maybe it's something we actually need to eliminate in order to protect our Kenyan brothers and sisters, so that this is a proper government scheme. We can account for the exact number of people that have gone. There's regular meetings between those workers, the migrants who've gone, and our Kenyan representatives in those nations, so that people can report things, and also so that there's almost a balance, or rather the people who are employing these people are accountable to somebody.
I think it's a good plan, but it's not something you can contain, because even if the governments will agree on numbers, and there'll be more people at any given time who want to pursue those avenues than those whom the government can legally allow to sort of go. So yes,
but if these people are going through agencies, then clearly the limitation of numbers is not an issue at the moment, because if you don't go through the government scheme, you're saying you would still use the agencies because of numbers. So the country is allowing you in, which means there's no limitation that the receiving country would put on our government.
They do put, because we will not be the only country who want to send people to their country.
Right.
So everyone will be given a quota. Yes,
and there's
so
also
there
the
are
issue of
limitations.
yes, it actually does happen. You see, all those agencies that are regulated, they're completely being regulated by the government, and there's an agreement between the government of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kenya. This is how people are going to come. This is how you shall receive them. You shall allow them to work and live in your country. But the black market also thrives, because the opportunities also appear, and they're working very well in the black market. You don't need to go through all this rigorous process of actually getting out of the country. I'll get you a passport, I'll hook you up with a job, you go.
Pay X amount and then we're
Pay
But
X
what
amount.
role does the Kenyan government, in terms of our representatives there, our embassy, what role do they play in ensuring that Kenyans are safe and free from torture and the conditions that they're subjected to? This is why I'm saying the agencies need to be eliminated from this, and it has to be, for instance, the way you apply for a passport, it's through the government. So the way you go to these countries is through the government, and make sure that it's as seamless as possible. It's easy, it's accessible, to avoid agencies coming up, and to encourage people to use the government route for this.
They will never be eliminated.
We use, for example, the National Employment Authority as the one that does this.
Why not?
Well,
We've seen how well that agency has
it's
and we know their
11
success.
minutes to 7 o'clock. Let's open up the phone lines as well. 0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600. You can post your comment on Facebook. Spice FM KE.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Would the government coming in to basically run the operations eliminate issues of stowaways and people who are seeking to migrate to other countries? Would it help? It already we know governments actually have these plans. They work with certain, with governments, and they have the bilateral agreements. We're going to provide labor for you. But there are people who are seeking opportunities. For example, Paul Manyasi, if he wanted to seek an opportunity in the UK, how would he have gone about it? Apart from just, in fact, how do you think what do you think was on his mind when he was actually getting on board this particular flight?
Well, I mean, it's
He wanted to
documented.
get-
It's
get
documented
to
that he
the
said to
UK.
his friend that he said he was going to get a job outside Kenya. Whatever other details he shared, we don't know, because she then said, well, so when I didn't see him, I just assumed that he had gone to get this job that he had told me he was going to get outside Kenya. He didn't give any other details about which country it was, what job, how he was going to go about and do this. But then it became clear later that the only option that he saw was, look, I don't have the money to apply for a passport. I don't have the money to then go through whatever agency it takes to make this happen. So I'm going to get on a plane. And wherever I land, I land. And he landed, and unfortunately,
how old was the
alive.
gentleman, if you don't mind me asking?
He was in his 20s,
20s.
apparently, yeah.
Okay.
Think of the powerful drive for opportunity. Higher learning institution in this country boomed because Kenyans believe that if you have a higher education, if you have a degree, the chances for the opportunity factor opened up greater for you.
Yeah.
For the longest time, our population, the bulk of our population was always in the rural areas. That has changed in the last few years, in that the movement towards the urban areas has been greater and greater. And why? It's again opportunity. Now, people move from the rural areas to a town or to a shopping center or to a place that they think is better and offers opportunity.
Yes.
When you get there, because of your exposure, you then understand that you don't just have to move within the boundaries. You can move out of the country.
Move out.
We speak about this and we forget within this particular country. The government even understood this even at independence when they set up, among other things, and for among other reasons, they set up what you call settlement schemes. People who live in settlement schemes don't live in the areas that they originally came from. They live in areas that were designated for people who want to move and to live in those areas.
Or perhaps people who'd been displaced, so maybe it wasn't a choice so much.
Yes, that is true. But it is people who they no longer live in the areas that they originally came from.
Mpekotoni is
But
one
the
of them.
government, I wasn't even thinking of Mpeketoni. Mpeketoni is...
What's an example of a settlement scheme?
Oh, they're all over the place. There's Muhoroni, there's Lambwe Valley, there's in Bungoma, there's Kitale, it's all over the landscape.
Right.
There are settlement schemes all over the country. That actually is the reality. And you will find that anyone, so long as you're Kenyan, could live in a settlement scheme. Anyone.
So this was designed by the Kenyan government or
Yes.
by the colonials?
No.
Was these the reserves? No.
It wasn't reserved. It was the Kenyan government. A lot of this land was land that previously been owned by settlers. So the UK actually gave the government a grant to buy off the farmers and then chopped off the piece of land to enable people to actually live there. Now, some people moved there because they were in flood-prone areas. Like if you look at the Lambwe Valley, the majority of people who lived there came from the Kano Plains, which were perennially flooded. People who live in the Muhoroni area, like myself, also came from the Kano Plains. And the bulk of the people who were there were people who were constantly being displaced by floods. The sort of things you're seeing here, constantly being displaced by floods. If you look at the Trans Nzoia area, you will find, all I'm saying was that it was a comprehensive plan that enabled people to actually migrate. But if you look at East Africa, you will be amazed at the number of young people I'm talking about Kenya, who are in Kenya from the East African countries, simply because the living in their countries is untenable. They haven't thought of going abroad. Abroad for them is coming to Kenya.
Right.
Okay. If you look at, when I say our
Or
neighbors,
also some of them are in transit.
Yes, some of them may be in transit.
Like
but
many from Ethiopia. We see the ones that come from Ethiopia land in Nairobi and their mind is settled on somewhere else, but this is just, a stepping stone. I'll be here for a while.
it is very, very true. Remember, Ethiopia began this migration again because, as Nyeri put it, there was strife. When the emperor was deposed, what happened was that many people who belonged to his community or people who were close to him were targeted. So if you're talking about communities of the Ethiopians abroad, they have very many of their people outside the country because of this very issue of strife.
When we get down to this, I mean, the root cause here is the government failing to provide opportunities for those who are enthusiastic and want to make it. I think that would have been the case with this gentleman, sadly in his 20s, and him not being aware of the dangers or the reality of what could have gone wrong. There's a phone call.
I want to take a phone call from Maurice, who's calling in from Kisumu. Good morning, Maurice.
Morning, how are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, City and the team.
Good morning, Morris.
Morning.
Morning, I hope Nairobi is okay.
It is fine, it's fine. What do you have to say about migration, Maurice?
Personally, I have no problem with migration, okay? I just have problem with people who migrate without information. You have to be informed that I want to migrate, okay. What do I want to go and do? What are my qualifications? Are these opportunities available? How much do they pay? and then you make an informed choice. Because from experience, I have relatives, when they got my siblings, who immigrated, and they're doing well, and not that they do not know what they wanted to do. You go there, you get an opportunity, you work, you study, you develop a career, you gain citizenship, and you move from step to step. You can even migrate as an informed seasonal worker. I'm just going to pick fruits in the UK for this number of days, for this number of months, make this amount of money, move to Spain, and then do their season and come back to Kenya. Don't go doing the wrong things that I just want to get there and you don't know what you're going to do there. That is, when things now become very gray. Yeah, but if you're informed, you know exactly what you're going to do. I mean, take your time. Let the internet be your friend. Apply for those jobs. Let that prospective employer tell you there's an opportunity, how to go around the visa things, if they'll accommodate you. Immigration will still go on because there are jobs that people really do. For example, like in the UK, in their fruit picking season, they even invite students to come and just for the experience of it. But those kids still don't want to do it, and they're paying about £6 an hour. So you see, the jobs are there, but you need to do.
You need to understand. Do your research.
Yeah, you do your research and know exactly what you're going to do and for how long. And then if you go there, just do that job, come back to Kenya, do your stuff, go for the next season. So the next time when I enter, you won't have those visa complications. You just go do your work and come back.
Right. Thank you, Maurice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
0719-012-600. We're taking in the phone calls this morning.
Sounds like he's informed, of course, a process perhaps he's been through or had relatives that have been through. But if you imagine this gentleman passed away, what's his name? Paul. The stowaway, in June this year, he wouldn't have had perhaps access to this
all of this information. Exactly.
He would have just heard the sort of rags to riches stories, the opportunities. We have it here. I think at KTN we do a program, Daring Abroad, and what we showcase is the successes of having gone abroad, because nobody's going to come out as an immigrant who is illegal and be willing to be on TV and talk about how awfully wrong it went. So what we actually see is the success, which encourages people. So this is the bit I was talking about, where maybe the government needs to highlight the potential pitfalls of immigrating. I'm going to use the UK again as an example, but they did have adverts on TV for people traveling abroad. So for places where, drugs, the accusation of drugs, or if you're convicted of drug trafficking, you could end up with a death penalty. So Bangkok, for instance, and the government communicated this to its citizens. There was adverts as, you could be actually banged up abroad. There was a TV series, and it's a warning to its citizens. It's looking to protect its citizens. So maybe some education, some information for Kenyans on the potential pitfalls, especially for those going to the Middle East, because there's been one too many cases there where we see terrible stories of people being subjected to horrible conditions and torture and reaching out for help and not being able to come back, having had their passports taken away and trying to get hold of their families. And it's a plea for sort of help. It's an SOS when you get these virals that go around on WhatsApp, usually a video with some really sort of disturbing images and sounds.
Phone lines are open, 0719-012-600, 0719-012-600. Also, you can post your comment on Facebook. The conversation is happening there. Spice FM KE. Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Spice FM.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
Traffic begins today on Thika Road all the way from the Roy Sambo Junction. So as the days go by, it gets longer. Thika Road is likened to a mess already, just at about 7 o'clock, and trying to get into the city centre is not going to be a walk in the park today, unfortunately. Let's see what's happening on other parts of the road. Trying to get into the city centre is going to be a headache today, because of the fact that everybody is still headed to, or most people are headed to the KICC for the ongoing conference. Waiyaki Way from Odhiru to Westlands is flowing well. It's not too bad right now, although that could change. All right, there's a bridge along the GM along Mombasa Road, but nobody ever uses it. So we have human traffic as well as vehicular traffic there today. It it has built up quite some. Also, to be understood that the road from Mlolongo heading all the way to Syokimau Junction is going to be closed for the next 10 days. So we will have worsened traffic situations on Mombasa Road just because of that and because of the road construction that is happening there. Also, some reports coming in from Mombasa town that yes, traffic is moving a lot slower because of the flooded road situation. We'll let you know what's happening in different parts of the city as we get along. 0719012600 is the number to call. Should you see something that we should know about, tell us and we shall share.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Nyeri Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
012-600. Conversation happening on Twitter. Spice FM KE is our Twitter handle, and The Situation Room is our hashtag this morning. We're discussing migration issues, and Nduoko is saying, look, the case of what we have on the Standard front page today, the Kenyan who fell from London skies in June, Mr. Paul Manyasi, has been identified by a report on Sky News, is not unique to just one person. It's actually happening across the continent.
It's happening across the continent, and I think we also need to take cognizance of the fact that, look, it is greener pastures that people are seeking, and they don't have a penny to spare when it comes to making more informed economic decisions. They don't have that extra coin to spare. If they had the extra, the desire wouldn't be there for them to go. It's because people don't have, and the situations are actually quite dire, and that is why they're making the decision to go. And every day after day, we're inundated with news about how it's getting worse. Food prices are going to go up. This, that, and the other thing is actually going to get worse.
There's no money.
There's no money.
The president
said yesterday he doesn't know why there's no money, and he's asking senior government officials to answer that question for Kenyans. He doesn't understand why Kenyans don't have money. The same sentiment could be spread across, and presidents don't understand why their citizens don't have money. So rather than answer that question, I'm going to hop on a boat and go. Yes.
Karaoke.
Hello.
Good morning. Calling in from Nakuru.
Good morning to you. How are you guys?
Very
Fine,
well,
thank you.
It's a long time since we talked.
Yes.
I hope you've been listening, though.
One boy is here.
Karaoke from Nakuru, Nyeri.
Yes, good morning.
Anyway, I want to comment on immigration.
Yes.
A little bit, maybe I take you a little bit to the Bible. If you can recall, or if you have read,
Yep.
the Bible says, kulikuwa na wale wakoma waine. If you can remember.
The lepers.
The lepers, they decided to go into the enemy land. Because even if they stay where they were, they are definitely going to die because there is this famine, if you can remember.
Yeah.
So they decided to go so that they can begin food, they can be given food, or they kill them. Because even if they are going to stay where they are, they must die.
They will die anyway.
They will die anyway. The reason why I'm saying this, those immigrants that are going outside the country, and especially the northern side of our continent, if you remember, most of them are going there just because of this kind of searching for greener pasture or maybe a better economic situation, isn't it?
Yes.
That's the reason why they go. So in this, even if you talk of how we are going to follow the government procedure or whatever you're going to say, remember in this country, In fact, 80% of our youth, I'm not a youth anyway, 80% of our youth, in fact, they are facing lack of job opportunity. And in fact, if you go back to the government side, even if they talk, let me use this word, they are very good preachers of peace. But when it comes to true action, they preach violence and in fact hatred, division among our people. So you don't expect any youth to remain where he is, and especially in this country.
So you're saying the situation is not good, and that's why people are leaving?
And in fact, it is not going even to change according to the setup of the current government. Let me say that. So therefore, many people go despite the fact that they know they are going to face danger on the way. But they decide to go just because. And
It's a risk they're willing to take.
Mr. Luka said something very important. That these people, even families contribute so that one of them can go to outside the country, so that even if he's going to get a better opportunity there, maybe in one way or the other he's going to send money back. Or if not, he's going to stay there and maybe feed his family. If not, the whole family. So therefore, what I'm saying, even if we talk today and tomorrow and even the other day, unless we change the government, the structures of the government, and we put down the strategy whereby they can start coming up and in fact do something to see to it that this country belongs to us all. And it is their chance now that they're in the leadership to create,
the opportunities.
to lay down the mechanism so that our economy can improve, so that most of our youth can get jobs.
Thank you very much, Karaoke.
Thank you very much.
Asante sana. 0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600. The conversation is happening on Twitter as well. Our hashtag is The Situation Room. And of course, our Facebook page is Spice FMKE. We're talking about immigration. And yes, I think the issue here is government. So if we say, for example, that governments need to take up this role, they'll be admitting, and they cannot admit that the reason why people are seeking these opportunities is because the government has not been able to provide a conducive environment for these opportunities to actually exist in the country in the first place.
You know, when I mentioned the settlement schemes, you see, people talk about settlement schemes that are popular, but they are a perfect example of what happens when the government actually takes serious initiative to forestall a problem that they can see. They can see we have an issue here, and this particular matter needs to be resolved. Now, the British government were even cleverer, because remember what you call Crown land, the land that was taken over. This was where settlers lived. So the UK government gave the Kenyan government money to buy off these people.
Yeah.
And the settlement schemes were in Nyanza, in Western, at the coast, in central Kenya. Meaning they understood. They saw this. Now, it's that lack of opportunity relevant to our times that is absence, and that's where you see this mass exodus. You can talk about population if you like, but the government knows how the population is increasing or decreasing. They understand it. That's why you have an entire ministry that deals with planning. That's what they're supposed to do. And say, this is what we need to do, and this is what we need to plan
Project and plan for the future.
Yes. There's really no excuse if you think about it.
From Mombasa, Zach, good morning.
Morning to you, Latif. How are you?
Salama kabisa. Welcome to The Situation Room. Poleni sana for the floods that are in Mombasa.
Thank you so much. We are swimming here.
Swimming?
Poleni.
Wow, okay.
It is time that everybody learns how to swim, because water is everywhere.
Right.
From the doorsteps.
Talk about immigration, Zach.
Yes, about immigration.
Yep.
It is so sad what is happening to other people who are migrating. But I don't think that government can do anything to change that. It is so unfortunate that even people in UK are migrating. So this is a world problem. It's not something just concentrated in poor countries like Kenya or other countries like Ethiopia. We find people are also risking their life migrating to other countries, even from UK. And we think UK is a greener pasture.
Can I ask you a question, sir, if I may?
Yes, please.
Would you say that there were more indigenous citizens of the UK moving from the UK than indigenous citizens of Kenya moving from Kenya to other countries?
I think people move regardless of if you're indigenous or not. I think it is lack of information. Mainly people migrate because of lack of information.
I think what CC is asking is if there are more Kenyans leaving Kenya than there are more British citizens leaving Great Britain.
Yes, more citizens of Kenya living in Kenya than they are living in UK. But we migrate to UK for greener pastures, and the indigenous of UK are migrating to other Arab countries for greener pastures. Yes, my thoughts are that this problem is mainly caused by lack of information, because there are many opportunities in Kenya.
Are there really? Are there opportunities in Kenya? And so why, if that's the case, then why do we have employment levels that have skyrocketed in the last, as it were, 18 months in this country? Why do we have the constant complaints that we have? And this is not people complaining because they feel the need to complain. This is the actual reality. People are not able to get jobs, and it's not enough. What is available is not enough for everybody. It doesn't go round. And that's something that's very clear. And we even say, okay, fine, if we're going to say, even if you can't get a job, then start a business. Is the environment conducive for people to start a business and then be able to run something on their own? Is it enough? Do they receive the adequate training that they need to be able to start a business? In terms of those opportunities, I think it's also quite clear that we are lacking there as well. And because of this lack, combined with the time that people have to spend in periods of want, that creates frustration, and it bubbles over to the point people are going to say, I need to get out. In order for me to survive, I need to leave.
Can I respond to that?
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. I think these are my thoughts. Those people who say there are no opportunities in Kenya, either you are greedy or you've set standards very high for yourself. Because you can start any business and start small and grow. But people want to get rich overnight. That's why you risk your life going to all the way to UK so that you can get better opportunities. While there are opportunities here, you can start a business, start small, then grow. Because even people in UK are still migrating to other countries to look for opportunities. It means there's something there that they have not opened their eyes and see it and tap to that opportunity. I think the main cause, I'm not downplaying that the government has not done much to help our youth in terms of employment. But we as citizens, I think we need to do something.
We lack information.
We need to help. Yes.
Thank you, Zach.
Interesting to note that Paul was 29 years old at the cusp of his 30s. So we're not looking at somebody we're looking at,
he's not a teenager.
He's not a teenager that was maybe on a whim trying to do something. In terms of not knowing what the information was, but at some point this was a calculated move that he made. And having been served with a lot of frustration over time, probably decided to make that move because he expressed as much to at least the people who were close to him and said, look, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, he had told them, I dream for bigger and better. I mean, living home, he had been in Nairobi for 10 years before he went. He had tried it before. He had seen, I deserve better. I can do better than this.
I can do better outside of these
I can do better
borders.
than this. And if maybe the opportunity, because of interacting with the airport and seeing people coming and people going, he saw there's an opportunity here. Let me go and seek that opportunity elsewhere. He has seen people actually migrating. And
yes, usually people don't look at the numbers who have probably ventured abroad and whose efforts have come to naught.
They look at those who
they're the majority. They'll pick on one person and say, haven't you heard of examples people give? Look at Zuckerberg.
Yes.
Look at
he made it, and so can I. Look at Obama.
Okay.
I can
one in a million.
Yeah, exactly.
I can be the second.
We understand. That's how people look at things. If you look at the frustrated voices you hear of in this country, it's of people who've actually gone to school. The motivation was what was to follow after school. Not school. Now, that particular promised land keeps moving further and further and further away because the expectations have not been met. And the more time you spend pursuing or looking for a job, the more convinced you become that this thing is never going to become a reality.
And the thing is, it's not just people who are impoverished when we're talking about people who can only put half a meal on the table.
it's not that.
Even people who work in what you would say is a corporate, kind of lavisher life would want to make the move if given the opportunity, or saying here's an option also for you to be able to go to another country and to be able to make it, as it were. You would be surprised at the numbers of people who would jump at that opportunity. People will take the chance and say, look, I want to go because it's better than that which I have. Are we not able to accommodate the dreams and aspirations as countries? Are we not able to accommodate these for people at whatever level of the totem pole we want to look at it, where we are people who are not able to make it with 3 meals a day, and to those who have a good job and maybe are able to make it and then maybe want to be able to get quality free education for their children? At different strata, we see people wanting to make the move, make the jump, because the pasture is a bit greener.
Indeed, the conversation continues 8:16 minutes after 7 o'clock. Good morning.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
Mombasa on 87.9, 102.5 Kisumu, 96.0 Nakuru, 96.7 Eldoret, 90.9 Nyeri, 97.7 in Malindi. We live stream on Facebook, Spice FM KE, on our website www.spicefm.co.ke. This is a Situation Room on Spice FM. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We have Eric Latif, Nduoko, C.T. Muga, and Nyeri Thorne. A conference happening in Nairobi from yesterday and ending on Friday.
It is indeed. The International Conference on Population and Development is happening. Started yesterday. Today is the closing day. In the agenda, or top of the agenda, is the reproductive rights of women. Now, by this, we encompass a number of things. So the right to contraceptives, not just access to contraceptives, but rights to contraceptives. With this comes in debates as to how old can you be before you can get these contraceptives. There's also, of course, sexual education in school. At what age should you be starting this? With regards to contraceptives, is at what age can you get contraceptives without parental consent? There's, of course, the need to end FGM, female genital mutilation, of which we've seen a case recently of 2 women trying to circumcise each other as adults, and that being deemed, or it's banned as well. So not just for children, but women as well. Of course, with that also comes the choices to what we do with our bodies. And when we talk about this, we're referring to abortion rights as women, which of course abortion in Kenya is prohibited with the exception of certain circumstances, including danger to the life and health of the expectant mother and rape. But unsafe abortions are a major cause of death and health complications in Kenya. The way in which the article or the provision in the constitution is put together or is framed means that unless a doctor deems it necessary because your life is in danger, you as the mother or the child's life is in danger, then abortion is illegal. Although recently there was a court ruling saying that abortion is legal when there has been a case of rape, and we'll look further into that as to why it should be restricted to rape, because our understanding of rape is very limited. The legal definition is very narrow. There can be situations where, of course, there's been coercion or undue influence or economic dependency, and as a result, somebody gets pregnant because of the pressure they were under. And this should as well, might as well be termed as rape. Of course, it's not in the legal sense. So a number of different issues to discuss under this. But it's abortion in Kenya. It's regulated by Article 26 of the Constitution, and it says abortion is not permitted unless, in the opinion of a trained health professional, there's a need for emergency treatment or the life or health of the mother is in danger, or if permitted by any other written law. So written law, in this case, we've had the expansion in June 2019 in the case of rape. But what tends to happen with this law is a lot of well-to-do people. Remember, the disparity in Kenya, wealth disparity in Kenya is huge. And this wealth disparity also reflects the access to health. There's a disparity in that. Some people simply don't have access to health. So what tends to happen is you'll find poorer people will not be able to see a doctor, will not have access to a doctor. It might cost them to see a doctor to give them this opinion. So in essence, this particular law only applies to a certain demographic. What you'll find is with people with a little bit more money, they can actually go to a doctor and speak to him and, pay for the services, and the doctor will deem it fit that the mother might be in danger and so on. It's down to his discretion. Now, the less fortunate in society don't have this option. So what tends to happen is they will procure sort of quack doctors, and you get a number of botched abortions happening. Just to give you some statistics, I think there was over 464,000 abortions induced. The information we have is dating back about 5 or 6 years ago, but that translates to an abortion rate of about 48 per 1,000 women aged between 15 and 49. So abortions are happening. This legislation to stop abortion is not stopping abortions. What it's doing is creating an environment where unregulated abortions or illegal abortions with quack doctors are happening, and a lot of women as a result are losing their lives. Stopes International estimates that 2,600 women die from unsafe abortions annually, an average of 7 deaths a day. Nearly 120,000 women are hospitalized each year due to abortion-related complications. So hopefully during these discussions, and today we'll be discussing reproductive rights of women. We'll look at contraceptives and consent and age and so on. But first and foremost, the right to an abortion and, pro-choice for the woman. Because what's happening here is with the legislation we have in place, it's not stopping abortions, it's putting a lot of lives at risk. We've seen the statistics. 7 women are dying every day by procuring abortions from quack doctors. These are botched abortions. There's 120,000 cases annually of women who are hospitalized as a result of these botched abortions. So the legislation is not working to stop abortion. What it's doing, it's putting women's lives at risk. So we need to actually decriminalize it, and we need to start regulating that sector so that everybody is protected by the Constitution and everybody can enjoy the rights afforded to us as Kenyans by the Constitution.
So I gather you are pro-choice.
I am pro-choice within reason, in that there's determinants as well. I'm pro-choice up to the first semester, which I think is what most countries that allow abortion do, because in the first semester, trimester, absolutely. Yes. I should know better. I've just gone through a pregnancy, haven't I?
You've gone academic.
I've just had a baby.
Well, you've gone academic on this one.
The first trimester, of course, whereby experts have universally agreed that this is the time where the fetus cannot survive independently of the mother. Of course, under our constitution, the church has waded into the conversation, and they've decided that life begins at conception. So
not only the church, there are other organizations, even outside church. Even outside church, there are people who have gone and they are pro-life, not necessarily because of their religious beliefs, but because of what they believe. At what point does life begin? Right. And I think if we now try,
our Constitution actually states this and declares this, which is very dangerous, because there's also things like embryonic stem cell research and so on, whereby in vitro, so that it's in a test tube, stem cells are created from conception, what we would consider conception, the fusion of an ovum and sperm. And this is used for research, and it's helped cure a number of diseases, genetic diseases, research for cancer. So, of course, this then becomes illegal for Kenya to do, because life begins at conception. The minute that you have that meeting of the ovum and the sperm, that is considered a life, and you have a right to life. So that cell, which is singular before it starts to divide, must be protected by the government. So it does lead to some absurdities. It's a limitation in terms of scientific research, which is something that needs to be considered. But with regards to right to, or pro-choice rather, as opposed to pro-life, people will argue, of course, that abortion is murder. But you do have cases where women have been raped. You do have cases where women face dire consequences for being pregnant. You have children who are coerced into, when I say children, people, sort of young
Underage.
adults, absolutely, who are coerced into situations where there's consent, but that consent, of course, is under duress and undue influence. So my suggestion is that perhaps the court widen the definition of rape when it comes to permitting abortion. And I am hoping these are some of the discussions that will be had in today's symposium.
Within our laws, the dictates of our laws, even if it is consensual and it's underage, it is illegal.
No, that's not the only time that it's not the only aspect of rape I'm asking to be widened, but you're completely right. I'm looking at situations where maybe there's coercion, where maybe because of a dependency, we talked about people coming from the village to live with families in urban areas for opportunities, and as a result of that dependency, you can have sex that consent is there in that there was not much of a resistance.
You're talking about underage marriage as well?
No,
I'm actually referring to a situation where two individuals who are both under the age of 18, under the consensual age, and a pregnancy arises from it.
It's considered rape. By the older of the adolescents, as the law stands.
It's an illegal act.
It is
they've
illegal.
tried to change that, yeah.
So what's the fate of the baby in that case?
The fetus?
Yes. So there's a pregnancy that has...
well, it depends. It should be the choice of the lady
Is
involved.
That covered in the new court ruling?
This is how it works. The moment a lady who is under the consensual age gets pregnant, they now get bumped up. They are now called mature minors. So they are actually given the rights of someone who is older in terms of the pregnancy and the state they're
and the choice they make.
Yes, if it happens that the partner in this particular activity is older,
then the partner
statutory rape.
Yeah, partner gets of course goes through the process.
Yes,
the criminal process.
Yes.
In Kenya, 23% of girls are married before their 18th birthday. So in this particular case, when you look at these 23% of girls who are married and before their 18th birthday, would we consider that they have a choice to actually go and say, well, it wasn't consensual?
I'll let Nyeri deal with this one because this is a legal issue. Yes, because of course consent in many cases is the parents who have given assent.
Right,
okay?
Exactly.
And they themselves, given the cultural circumstances or whatever it is, have not objected.
Yeah.
But according to the law, Jerry, please chime in.
According to the law, we discussed this a few weeks ago with Justice Odunga and his ruling on trying to reduce the minimum mandatory sentence for rape. Because if you remember, there was public outcry when he tried to reduce the age of consent to 16. And this was to avert situations whereby you have teenagers finding themselves unknowingly on the wrong side of the law for having engaged in sexual activities. So it is still considered rape because consent doesn't count if you're under 18. And what happens is, of course, the older in the two participating, whether both teenagers or one being under 18, but the older in the two would be accused of rape, and consent is not a defense as things stand. What we've seen in order to circumvent such scenarios is judges try and reduce the minimum mandatory sentence so as to circumvent incidents or outcomes that would otherwise be considered unjust. But in terms of rape, it's still considered rape, so which falls squarely under this ruling by the Supreme Court in June 2019 that allowed pregnancies that are a result of rape to be terminated by experts. So if you're underage, so basically they're opening it up. If you're underage and you get pregnant, underage being 18 as things stand, or the age of consent being 18 as things stand, if you do get pregnant, you can now legally have an abortion.
You can procure an abortion.
You can procure an abortion.
But basically, you must make the decision that I want the abortion. It's not...
You can't be forced into an abortion.
Good.
No.
So, I mean, we're now entering into... When we do enter into, like, early marriage, where we do have 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds who get married and then have children, this then is against the law.
Absolutely, it's rape.
It is so absolutely against
It is,
against the law.
It's statutory rape, even in countries whereby 14 can be considered old enough to give consent. Anything under 14 is statutory rape, even in liberal countries where you can give consent, 14 or 16.
So then it becomes, because now we're saying abortion in Kenya is it's criminal. right?
No.
Abortion,
Unless-
the laws have been
except
quite clever.
in the
Except-
case of
Yeah.
rape. So in
No.
this case,
Or
if
there's-
this,
there's two-
14-year-old girl, I mean, if you want to now play right between the lines, if this 14-year-old girl who then gets pregnant, although she is married, decides then she wants to terminate this pregnancy, she's well within the confines of the law to then be able to carry out an abortion.
As of June 2019,
Let
yes,
me ask
the
the
Supreme
question.
Court ruled.
According to our laws, is she really married?
Well, again,
That's the thing.
That's another question.
as well.
At 14, is she
Is
married?
she really married?
Well, at 14, she was raped.
You
That's
see,
what's
the
important.
other, I think the other
Regardless of the
balance
choice,
She was
comes
raped,
in.
was
whether
by
or not
her-
she
her-
consented.
The other
Right.
balance comes in that our Marriage Act allows and recognizes traditional customary marriage. So in customary marriage, if a certain custom allows underage marriage, what's the case there?
No, customary marriage, I think, would be that the marriage is recognized
The
as
process.
a marriage, the process, without you having to go to.
To contravene other legal factors that play into this particular situation,
Yes,
like
but-
age.
Yeah, without you having to go to the AG or
So it's
wherever it is we
limited.
legally get married.
So it's
But
limited.
yeah,
you must be an adult, and then you it's the
absolutely,
fact that
the
we're
other
going
aspects
through-
of the law still apply. What it is that the marriage is recognized, even if you didn't go through the AG and so on. If you did your ngorario and whatever it is people do in different traditions, if you did all that, then it's legally recognized. It's not to say that within those practices you can then break other laws. It has to be within the framework of the law, in that you don't contravene any.
The reason I'm dragging
laws.
us down that road is because of the statistic. 23% is a very high number. 23% of our girls below the age of 18 are married, and they are government officers across the country, and yet we haven't seen any action being taken to actually secure these
But
people.
usually you see the government won't get involved, the prosecution, unless somebody presses charges. So maybe it's lack of knowledge, and the communities we have, because they're accepting of it, you're not going to find them sort of going out there and calling the police about it. So unless somebody's prosecuting, unless somebody's pressing charges, it's something that could go on, especially in rural areas and villages. And of course the government also, out of public policy and just sort of social policy, they understand that some practices will take a while, for society to catch up, for some cultures to die out, even if there's a law in place. So as opposed to going out and looking for them, they turn a blind eye to a certain extent, so long as it's not deemed
trying to in a way accommodate.
well, they turn a blind eye to a certain extent, so long as it's not detrimental to any individual, but in the hope that eventually the practice will die down, and the legal instrument here, the act, sort of banning underage marriage or underage sex in this instance, because it's rape, that will come into play.
I'll argue that that's the same case we have in our current constitution when it comes to abortion. It's the same thing, I think. It's the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. 27 minutes to 8 o'clock. Let's take a look at what's happening on the roads.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
So they opened up the roundabout in Westlands, and it caused some monumental traffic for the last 2 days. And so they've decided now to put the barriers back on the roads. And so we do have quite another mess again coming off of Wayaki Way. It's laughable almost. So I don't understand why that decision was made, but it was made all the same. So now the barriers are back, and let's see if the traffic situation gets better, or if they're going to open up the roundabout in a couple of days again. But we don't know. All right, construction is going on parts of Mombasa Road, so that's going to contribute to the traffic snarl up that we see, and it's going to be there for a few days, so please brace yourselves for that. We also have quite the number of entrants into the city centre today because of the conference happening at the KICC, which kicks off in another 1.5 hours. So everybody's trying to make their way in there right now. That's why you see heightened levels of traffic between yesterday and tomorrow. Also note that right now Langata is not moving. Langata Road rather is not moving, trying to get into the city centre as well. Traffic is the thing today. Apart from that, not so bad. Apart from, of course, thicker superhighway, where we had traffic starting as far back as the Roy Sample Junction earlier, and it's still moving at a snail's pace, but it's moving all the same. Let's see what it looks like in a short while. For now, sit tight. Remember, the roads are a bit wet, so be careful while you do.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
So the International Conference on Population and Development is happening right now in Nairobi as we speak. Reproductive rights of women are at the core of some of these discussions on the agenda, of course. And when we talk about reproductive rights, we're looking at things like a right to contraceptives, and contentious issues may arise because we look at, can a child, for instance, attain or have access to these contraceptives without parental consent. We look at FGM, which the president has vowed to eradicate and make sure it's a thing of the past. And then, of course, we look at abortion and choice and the right of the woman. And we then compare that, or if we juxtapose these intentions and some of these conversations and deliberations that are happening at this conference with our constitution, we can then see that actually we need to reinterpret some of these laws or give some of these laws a broader interpretation in order to ensure that the intentions of the conversations that are happening and the pledges that are being taken by even our presidents crystallize. For instance, in the Constitution, of course, abortion is illegal. It says abortion is not permitted unless, in the opinion of a trained health professional, there is a need for emergency treatment, or in the life or health of the mother is in danger, or if permitted by any other written law. Now, in June 2019, there was a ruling by the Supreme Court, which of course is then binding and will eventually come into legislation, whereby abortion was actually allowed if the pregnancy was as a result of rape. Now, today, what I am suggesting is that the definition of rape be expanded to actually include situations where even if there was consent, they might have been undue influence. They might have been situations where there's a level of dependency on an individual. I gave the example, somebody coming to live with a relative from a rural area to an urban area, and because of the situation and the environment, the dependency and the power balance, somebody falls pregnant because consent wasn't an option per se, but they can't take it to court as rape.
Bless you.
Excuse me. Of course, it's a contentious issue. You have people who claim it's murder. You have people who claim it's the right of the woman. And these are the debates that will be had. But what's important to recognize is the consequence of this legislative policy that we have within our constitution that says that, yes, you can get an abortion if a health professional deems it necessary being that it's a danger to the life of a woman. The consequence of this is there's a certain demographic that can access abortions very easily. People with money who can see a doctor, who have access to healthcare. And this leaves out a very large demographic in Kenya of the less fortunate who don't have money to see a health professional, who would have who would have the qualifications to make this declaration and ensure
so
that it's a legal process.
Is that
so poorer people
we don't have universal access to healthcare. Because if we had that, then we'd say that everybody then has access to a qualified medical practitioner.
If I'm going to simplify what I'm trying to say here is abortion is legal for the rich and illegal for the poor. And as a result, what tends to happen, I mean, that's oversimplified, but that is the result of this provision. Those are the unintended consequences, or perhaps intended, I don't know. But that is the result of this provision and the system and structures and facilities that we have in this country. This is what tends to happen. As a result, you have a lot of women procuring abortions through, backdoor channels. You have a lot of quack doctors coming in. So it's not regulated. So it's not stopping the abortions. What's happening is people are going through backdoor channels and getting botched abortions. I gave you some statistics. 7 women die every day from botched abortions in Kenya.
But you also have
7 women. Morbidity in women, that's a very high rate.
It's a very high number.
120,000 women.
It's a very high number.
But you also have quite
where
a number.
are those people? Are they in places that have actually access to medical facilities?
No, you'll find these are people at the lower end of the economic.
But they're in urban
curve.
areas.
They might be in urban areas in terms of their geographical location.
Yes.
I don't have that statistic.
So there's access to a hospital. It's just that they know that if they went to this hospital, this doctor would not be able to say that, yes, your life is in danger.
Yeah, because
it's because it's a choice that you're making to basically
no,
terminate
what
this
tends
pregnancy.
to happen, a doctor
ignore-
will listen to you if you're paying them. And the rich people can do this. You can go and see a doctor, perhaps even know a friend who is a doctor.
You're
given
imputing improper
your
motive
But you know the
on
thing
the
is,
medical
but the thing is,
profession.
we can't ignore the fact that there are quite a number of women, young women, who go and get abortions because they found themselves pregnant because precautionary measures were not taken in terms of birth control.
Yeah.
And we have quite a number of young women who say, well, okay, I've gotten pregnant, and if that's the case, well, and if we decide we don't want it, I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of it.
Yeah.
There are quite a number of young women who are doing this. And then how do we regulate that? Because if we say, okay, yes, you have the right to,
No,
you
know
have the
path you've
right
just
to
taken?
choice. I'm telling you what the situation
You
is.
talk about regulating sex, unprotected sex.
No, that's what I'm saying. If Nyeri is saying that it needs to be regulated, how are we going to regulate that?
No, we need to widen the scope
How-
so
how
that
will
there's
that
a
be
safety net to
regulated?
catch
But you
everybody.
see,
What
we
is
are
happening
sneaking
what
in
I'm
the
in-
current
saying-
we
law?
are sneaking
Can I
in
just complete
choice.
what I'm saying is in this case, whereas people don't take the family planning method or use that,
What you're
or
saying
use
is that it could encourage
So it is
unsafe sex.
or
Yes.
it is
encouraging.
it is encouraging people to
Unsafe
use it.
sex.
No, it is encouraging people to use that as a way out
As a
of
contraceptive.
pregnancy, as a contraceptive.
There's no
And people
evidence
do
to
it-
that effect. No, there's no
People
evidence to that
are
effect.
getting
Under the
abortions.
family
To,
planning
people are getting
umbrella.
people are getting abortions, not apart from the whole aspect of rape, but because I have realized I don't want this baby, and a lot of people are getting abortions just for that.
Which is fine.
And that's
which
a
is fine,
that's
although
where,
our
that's where-
constitution
that's
says
where the
it's-
dichotomy in conversation
Now,
comes in.
this
coming
is-
in, and
issue
that's
of
why the
understanding what I'm
constitution
saying. A
came up
rich
with that, so that
person,
people
a
won't
rich
do that.
person can decide, I don't want this baby.
But not
So-
only rich
But
people are
if-
making that
but
decision.
So
wait.
no, what I'm saying is poor people do not have this avenue.
So what you're saying
because
is that
they
the
don't
rich,
have access
rich,
to a doctor.
rich people
Oh, they
are
do.
compromising
No.
doctors.
They
so
do.
why are they going?
Are you saying that
Speak
rich
to
people are
Plan
compromising?
International, and they will tell you why these botched abortions are happening.
Plan
Because if-
International is just
if-
one of
if-
the few
no,
organizations
but they will
And
that
it's
give
on
you
one
the
side.
statistics. So where are
Yes.
these statistics of botched abortions coming from and consequent 7 deaths a day of women? These are not professionals that are carrying out these abortions. It's because it is very difficult
No.
for somebody
It
who is living
because
below a
it's very
certain
difficult
economic
to
life.
convince a doctor who is
No.
actually
No.
practicing the
You will
profession
find
seriously
most
that-
of these
that your
women
life is
belong
in
in a
danger.
certain most of these women belong in a certain economic demographic.
Well, their
and
lives in
you'll
danger.
find it. No, my point is okay.
Because
For a
what
doctor,
our constitution
it's-
currently
it's
allows,
very, you
and
see,
you're saying that
life
what
in
our
danger. No,
constitution
life
has
in
currently-
danger can be very broad. I could go to a doctor and say I feel suicidal as a result of this pregnancy. It's very subjective. It can be very broad. It can be very mischievous. Now, what I'm saying is there's a certain demographic that, as a result of the provisions in this constitution, the wording and the framing of it, they will have access to abortions. And then the poorer people, because they're not going to have access to doctors who they can influence, they're not going to have access to medical care, for instance, or it's not provided under public hospitals. Private doctors will do as you want them
I
to.
think, Jerry,
If
I
I
think
go
this
to a
is a wrong
private doctor
premise.
now, we can
It's a
find a
wrong
way to
premise.
It's
deem
not
it
just
that
wrong
it's
premise,
dangerous.
it's
No,
even
I'm
the
telling
wrong
you the
premise.
Even
consequence.
the points
This
you're
is the
making on
reality
the
of
argument
it.
are fallacious.
This is the reality on the ground.
The reality
I'm
on
telling
the
you.
ground.
which
When we
ground?
talk, when we
Supported
talk
by
about
which
120 botched abortions, who are we talking about?
It's not just poor people.
Are we
Jerry,
talking
it is
about
big-
what I'm
120
saying is
women whose
generally-
lives were in danger?
No, who have been hospitalized
All right.
as a result of botched
All right.
abortions.
Do we have the
Do you think it's
demographics
the
that
wealthy
gives
going
you-
to quack doctors?
Do you
Let's
have-
look at the common sense here. Do you think
The
it's the
common
wealthy
sense-
going
No,
to quack
Jerry,
doctors?
Jerry.
No,
It's
it's
not.
not.
It's not.
No,
Now, what
it's
I'm
not
saying
common
is this
sense.
provision.
If you're talking numbers, are there facts that these botched abortions belong to people who are in the lower social structure of the society?
all 120.
No, I'm not saying all 120 of them. But if you're wealthy, you're not going to find a
Are
quack.
there facts?
You're not going to find a quack.
Are there
what I'm
facts?
saying here
You'll be
is if I have
surprised that
access to a
even-
private doctor
But look
and
at-
I can pay a private doctor,
Okay, let's
I
just-
can have some influence, and it's very easy for us to decide actually it's a danger to the mother's life. I give you a very simple example of how mischievously that provision can be interpreted. If I go and say perhaps I'm suicidal as a result of this pregnancy, that's a danger to my life, especially at this day and age where we acknowledge mental health and so on. Now, somebody who doesn't have access to a private doctor and doesn't have the same influence, I can go and pay a doctor to do this.
Why I'm saying
somebody
the
who
numbers,
can't
why
afford
I'm
to pay a
saying
doctor
those,
to do this will go and get a
Jerry,
quack doctor to procure that abortion.
You'll
You
be
have
surprised at the
contacts-
numbers
you have
of young
contacts with
women
a
who,
doctor
with the
who
number
is-
of young women that I've actually sat down and spoken to who've gotten abortions. They have the money to do so, but they're not going to go to mommy and daddy and say, take me to your private doctor. They're going to go hide in the backwoods and say, let me procure this abortion so that
Absolutely.
nobody
I'm not
knows
saying
about
those
it.
cases. I'm
That's
not
a
saying
quack-
those
that's a
cases.
quack doctor.
I'm not saying those cases don't exist, but those are few and far between. Most rich people can afford to have an abortion, whereas poor people can't, both legally afford and financially
Where do you
afford.
get these facts that support this view?
See,
Njeri?
I have just
Ndu has
given
just
you a
given us
snap.
an
Yes, and
example
I have
of
said it
a rich
exists.
person.
That doesn't negate from what I'm
No,
saying.
you're
Why don't
saying
we
one
open up the
thing
phone
and
lines
then
because
argue
we'll
against
have
it
doctors
immediately.
calling
It
in.
cannot be most, Jerry, because you're saying that most doctors in this country will actually just be able to sell you an abortion.
Absolutely.
No.
Then let's open up the phone lines. If that's the case, 0719 012 600, 0719 012 600. Jerry Thorne is saying the provisions in our constitutions are allowing for people who are of a certain demographic to be able to access abortion services, and those from another demographic, poorer people, not to be able to access abortion services. And what
then
happens?
Turn
They
to
end
quack
up-
doctors, then they have botched abortions, and that's
many
where
of
we
them
get
die.
these figures.
As many as 7 a day are dying out of botched abortions. What do you think? Phone lines are open, 0719 012 600. Good morning, it's a 7:45.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
So we're having 7 women die every day as a result of botched abortions. We have 120,000 women who are hospitalized due to complications from botched abortions. So the legislation to actually stop abortion as per the Constitution is not working. What is happening is we're having backdoor abortions. This industry, or sorry to call it an industry, but this practice needs to be legalized so that it can be regulated, so that also you can have abortions early on in your pregnancy, and we can remove some of the ethical issues that come with the trimester and the term at which you have your pregnancy. Because what tends to happen, if people don't have easy access to abortion, what will happen is they could delay the decision in finding somebody, and they start to have abortions at 7-8 months, which now is a child who could survive independently outside the mother's womb. And this does happen, whereas if it was completely regulated, you would find that it's easier to procure or to have an abortion in the first trimester, where it's been agreed generally, conversations still ongoing of course, but for those countries that do allow abortion within the first trimester, it's considered that the child or the fetus would not have been able to survive on their own, and therefore the mother has a choice.
Bernard calling in from Mombasa. Good morning.
Yes, hello. Good morning, Spice FM.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, you guys are really opposing Jerry about the point she's giving out that some of the people who are well off in the society are able to acquire these abortions easily.
Actually, I'm not opposing it. I'm just asking for the facts that support that view.
No, that is not a fact. When you come on the ground, what is happening on the ground? What is happening to our young girls in the society? Most of them that their parents are well off, when they get pregnant and they don't want to raise the child, they go and pay some money to the doctors, and these abortions are done. But those who are not able are the ones who.
Sorry, what happened?
We lost him. I have Francis on the line. Francis, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, I want to make contribution on the case of rape and
abortion.
consent.
Yes.
Yeah, consent, especially as it relates to rape and as it relates to underage marriage. Legally, consent and sex has to do with has to be contractual in nature, and one of the elements of consenting is capacity. When one is a minor, it is considered that there is no way a minor can consent because the minor does not have that contractual capacity to consent. So there's always a presumption at law here that whatever consent gotten from a minor is illegal. Secondly, for the case of underage marriage and consent of what we call locus parentis, that is in lieu of the parents, whereby parents give their child to marriage at underage. The presumption at law too is that it is illegal, despite the fact that the consent came from a parent who is mature, because one of the elements, contractual element to this is that, one of the contractual elements is that there must be the capacity and the contract must be legal when it is against the law. Probably the law provides that 18 years is the age of consent, and a parent who is an adult gives a daughter of 14 years to marriage. The presumption at law is that it is still illegal because you cannot make a contract by illegality.
Right.
Yeah, this is one of my contributions.
Thank you very much, Francis.
Yes, I want to wade into the Kenyan constitution that provided for
abortion.
Life from conception. Yes, I think that constitution is very draconian in nature, and something should be done about it.
Absolutely.
Reasonably, there is no way, if we take emotion aside and take religious or moral value aside, there is no way life could ever start upon conception, because for life to amount to a valid life, it must be a life that could survive independently. From conception until birth of a baby, the baby is dependent on the
mother,
life of the mother to survive. So when a life is dependent, it cannot amount to a life in the strict sense of the law. So Kenyans should look into that aspect of their constitution and
of
find
course,
a way to
of course, that's changing as medical technology develops, in that premature babies being born younger and younger are surviving. So it's a very fluid part of the law, very contentious, of course. You have babies as young as 20 weeks surviving outside the womb in incubators, and with the technology and medical advancements that we've seen in the 21st century, it then becomes a moot point as to whether it's a life or not. And of course, what life means is also questionable. Somebody on life support who's brain dead, is that life? It's a question that I don't think our constitution has the right to answer, which they have done. We have decided that life begins at conception. Of course, an old age question that even the greatest philosophers haven't been able to respond to. But in essence, basically, the effective implementation of the Constitution in Kenya has to be the potential to promote women's access to safe abortion services and support reduction in complications of unsafe abortions. That's what we should be looking to achieve. There's, of course, also an urgent need for the training of providers to offer safe services. We've just had a ruling by the Supreme Court, which, of course, is then legally binding, and there'll be a statutory instrument, I'm sure, sooner than later to actually reflect this, that if you're raped, you can have an abortion. But of course, you need healthcare providers. It needs to be in a safe environment. So this needs to be promoted as well.
Phone lines are open 0719 012 Alfred from Nairobi, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, I was listening to your conversation. I just wanted to make a small contribution.
Please do.
Yeah, so I think the issue that we are discussing is not necessarily a legal issue, but it's also an economic issue, as Jerry puts it. If you go to most slums, for example, you realize that we have several chemists. some of these young girls, they use these chemists to do abortion. And I think as much as Nyeri lacks the statistics to give you, we've had in the media so many cases where these chemists are assisting the young girls and even the ladies to do the abortion.
Yep.
So I think this is a case where these ladies don't have any enough money, and maybe they just go to this local chemist to procure an abortion. So for the people who are rich, I don't think if they would be able to go to such areas to do an abortion. So this is an issue where it's the young girls that are disadvantaged, that are mostly lack options, or maybe their parents are not able to even assist them. So they rush to these places to procure abortion. So I think that is a valid point that Jerry was raising, and we really need to look into it, yes.
Thank you, Alfred.
Thank you so much.
I think the issue here is not whether abortions are actually being procured or not. It's whether the legal abortions are being procured or not, right? And the Constitution, if you look at the balance and why the balance came in, so the Constitution had the issue of abortion coming in right there at the Bill of Rights and saying, if you are pregnant and then a medical professional actually deems that something needs to be done to this pregnancy, either your life is in danger or for other reasons, and you're saying also the other provision is through other provisions that are brought in through legislation, then the doctor can actually say, let's help you go through, get an abortion. Now, what we are seeing is people who are actually going to procure abortions, not through medical doctors, not that they've gone to hospital and their lives were in danger and then they could not access the services of a doctor or something like that, but it's people who've decided, I want to procure an abortion. And then they go into those back alley clinics and chemists, and they're procuring these abortions. It's illegal. So the issue we're discussing here is, should they have the choice to actually walk into a hospital and say, you know what, it doesn't matter.
Should we make it safer? Should we make it more accessible? I'm not saying easier and try and encourage abortion as a form of contraception, which is what Do sees as a possible consequence of loosening or ensuring these laws actually help everybody as opposed to just the rich, because that is what will happen. That is what is happening. We're hearing from people.
Should we allow abortion?
We do allow it at the moment as things stand. If you look at the provisions,
we allow it without any blanket?
No, because
we open up the
should
doors?
we open it up completely?
If you look at the legal technicalities,
no.
If you look at the legal technicalities, the wording and framing of some of our provisions, it would actually be contradictory or be conflicting. The Constitution will be self-conflicting, self-contradictory, because you have somewhere the right for life to be protected in the Constitution. And then you have this declaration by what I believe to be the churches, who have decided life begins at conception. So we don't want to legalize. In order for everything to be constitutional, you're not going to say we're going to legalize abortion. So what the drafters of the legislation have done is tried to create a situation where if you do need an abortion, you can have one. And they've given this, if your life is considered to be in danger, of which a doctor can interpret that very broadly. I gave an example. If you say you feel suicidal, it can be considered that your life is in danger. Mental health and mental well-being is considered a serious issue today. So it's very easy to actually get an abortion. But in terms of completely legalizing it, unless we go back and change other provisions in the Constitution, such as life does not begin at conception, therefore the government doesn't have a duty to protect life as such, being a fetus before a certain level of development. So there's all those things that have to be counterbalanced.
That's what I'm asking. Is that what the pro-choicers are actually advocating? That
pro-choicers are saying
let's remove this provision that says life begins at conception.
Let me throw some figures at this.
Let me throw
some figures at this. WHO 2010-2014 report. One of the things that they pointed out was that deaths caused by abortion, they give a percentage. It constitutes something like 18% of maternal death. But significantly, countries in which it was outlawed and hence performed clandestinely, there were more deaths. So you found only 54% of people probably survived this. Whereas in countries where it was not outlawed, 92% of those who sought these services were actually safe. Now, of interest, we had an organization called Family Planning of Kenya, FPK, for the longest time. Then we had an organization called Marie Stopes. They advertise as providing not just family planning services, but family health care services.
Yep.
Now, One of the problems that they faced was when 2010 there was a move to sort of like introduce some of these safeguards and to open up this spoke. The NCCK opposed it completely to save lives.
It's about saving lives. Yes. It's not about somebody making a choice to end life.
No.
Okay. This is the conversation we're having. 0719 012 0719 012 It's coming up to 8 o'clock. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Good morning.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
All right, folks, heavy fog is being reported in some parts of Kikuyu town, and that is feeding off onto coming down through Wayaki Way. So please be careful as you drive, because the visibility is limited because of the fog, and we also have that some showers are coming down in that area. So it's actually going to compound our traffic issues that we're already seeing today in most parts of the city. Thika Road and Langata Road are feeding us major problems today, as they did yesterday. Let's see how it works out through the week. Remember that we have some road construction going on further down Mombasa Road, and that is affecting how you're getting down into the city centre. Jogo Road is being a happy camper today because you can get to the City Stadium roundabout, but thereafter you're going to have a bit of a problem getting into the CBD. Let's see how that opens up now when we're past the 8 o'clock hour. All right, coming off Ngong Road is giving us a bit of problems as you get to the T-Mall roundabout, and that's coming off Langata Road and trying to get onto Bagathi Way. You're going to have a bit of a headache because the traffic is traffic after traffic after traffic, unfortunately.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Nyeri Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
2 minutes after 8 o'clock. Good morning, and thank you very much for choosing the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. So this week, starting yesterday and concluding tomorrow, is the International Conference on Population and Development, ICPD 25, that's happening in Nairobi. It's taking stock of a similar meeting that happened 25 years ago. So we're looking at it 25 years later. So among the issues that are being discussed is women's rights and sexual rights and reproductive rights. Of course, it has brought in the debate of abortion, and pro-life and pro-choice groups have, of course, come in again to discuss this. So this morning, Nyeri Thorne is raising the issue of abortion and saying we need to broaden up the view and what we call legislation regarding abortion. And and the avenue that you're using is the Supreme Court ruling in June. Was it June or July?
It was June 2019 that actually allowed for abortions to be legal if they were resultant of a rape. I'd like to extend that in that the definition of rape there should be interpreted very broadly. It shouldn't be rape as we know it per legislation, where there's penetration without consent. It should be expanded to understand social setups that whereby women find themselves in situations where they're actually unable to say no. So there might be no force used, but there's a lot of power and dependency, a power imbalance between the two. I gave the example of somebody coming from rural areas to live with a relative in urban areas, and they find themselves completely dependent on this person financially and so on. And as a result, they can be undue influence and the level of dependency. So consent is not... it's not voluntary, if ever there was an oxymoron, but you understand this is a situation whereby there's been undue influence. Basically, what I'm advocating for at this point is that the definition of rape, as per the case decided in the Supreme Court in June 2019, that allows or legalizes or permits abortions for pregnancies that are as a result of rape, the definition of rape needs to be painted with a very broad brush so as to encompass anybody who would have found themselves pregnant, not because they were careless and perhaps weren't using contraceptives, but because perhaps they were coerced into the situation.
Once you get that foot through the door, where will you go to next?
That's one of the things I'm agitating for today. The second thing I want us to look at is our legislative policy, and in this case the Constitution and the provisions in the Constitution for abortion. When I say for abortion, the stipulations for abortion, and it states, and this is not verbatim, but something along the lines of abortion is legal if a doctor deems it necessary because the mother is in danger, or the mother's life is in danger, or by any other written law. So by any other written law will eventually now espouse or embrace this new ruling in 2019, so by rape. But in terms of the mother finding herself in a place or in a situation where her life is in danger, what the consequence, the practical consequence of this provision has been is that people with money can go and see a doctor, and they're able to negotiate with the doctor, discuss with the doctor, and get to a point where the doctor can easily say and state that yes, the mother's life is in danger. So it's very easy for them to get abortions. And then you find,
if your life is in danger, why would you need to convince someone that your life is in danger?
No, because the life is in danger. Consider it a footnote. There's an undertone or there's an undercurrent you're missing here.
Let's come back to this. Let's come back to this conversation. Timothy is calling in from Nairobi. Good morning, Timothy.
Morning, how are you?
Good morning.
Fine, thank you.
Good morning.
Yeah. Now, on one aspect, I agree with Nyeri. But I only say let's legalize abortion when we have clear statistics on the abortions that we have. Are they out of rape? The ones that we are facing, the deaths that we meet.
Right.
Are they out of lack of consent? Because this is a huge Pandora's box. In the sense that once you give the leeway, it is subject to abuse. One other thing I would request you guys to do, I personally married to a doctor who's a gynecologist.
Right.
And if you brought in a doctor here to speak openly on what is happening, like for instance in Nairobi, you'd be shocked that the bulk of the women procuring abortion in Nairobi are married, with a husband, wealthy,
exactly,
very wealthy. So it is not really I am unhealthy or I'm not capable or I was raped. It's become more of I can do this.
Which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So a woman should have the choice. I don't want to carry through this pregnancy to its full term. I don't want to have a baby. Whether or not your life is in danger. So the Constitution, it gives you an avenue through which to do
some
this.
People, to others it's not. Timothy, let me ask you this question. When the example that you've just given us of wealthy people who have means and being able to procure these abortions and married as well, Are they sort of having to convince, by enticing the doctors to give them the abortions, or is it a clear case of my life is in danger? Or are they going to?
No, my life is in danger.
Are they going to back alley?
Danger is a footnote.
There is completely no life in danger.
Absolutely.
Because remember again, abortion is just a drug you take. You're given a drug a couple of hours, you insert it down there. And after some time, it creates involuntary actions. And
that's one method. That's only one method.
Can we go back to this lives are in danger? What happened here is...
There is no life at danger.
Absolutely. What I'm saying, it's a footnote. It's something also to circumvent or to stop us from having a contradictory or conflicting constitution. Because remember the Constitution, and this is what I've said, it's absurd because it defines when life begins. Life begins at conception. That is stated in the Constitution categorically.
Right.
And then the Constitution also has a provision where the right to life. So the government has a duty to discharge to protect life.
Right.
So it must protect this fetus.
So in this area where it's permitting
now
abortion,
this is what I'm getting
does it
to.
say?
This is what I'm getting to. In order to be able for the government to say or to allow this without being contradictory of the Constitution, they then create a scenario where there's exceptions.
Yes.
Now, the exception is if the woman's life is in danger, because also there's a life to protect there. And what they've decided in this case is the woman's life is more important than the fetus's life. Because remember, they've also decided the fetus is a life. The fetus being an embryo, maybe a zygote or with 4 cells or whatever, is considered life. But the rationale would be that the woman's life is more important, which of course is debatable. If you're going to decide life is life, and this is why there's absurdities that arise from defining when life begins. But we have chosen, or the rationale of the drafters in the Constitution have decided the woman's life is important. And so they've created a provision whereby if the woman's life is in danger, yes, she can get an abortion. Now, also they've created, or if it's written in law, which it's going to be after this ruling from the Supreme Court, if there's been rape. Now, what I'm saying is that in essence allows abortion for the rich. For whether abortion is right or wrong because of choice is another debate. Which is what he brought in, where he's saying, well, they don't do it for, they don't do it. What happens is the rich people are able to exploit this loophole, whereas the poor can't. And what tends to happen is the poor end up getting these backdoor abortions with quack doctors. They're botched abortions where 7 people are dying every day, and you have 120,000 people being
the argument I'm having, Jerry, is that even those backdoor abortion places, you're not paying 100 shillings. You're paying a lot of money.
But it's still much easier.
No, is it possible for you to go to a doctor?
It's actually cheaper if you went to a public hospital.
If you went to a public hospital.
But in a public, now, you're not understanding. You know, we've got to apply this. You're looking at this very literally.
But when we disagree with you, it's not that we're not understanding. We're just giving you an alternate view.
You can go to a public hospital, but if the doctor doesn't deem, first of all, the stigmatization that comes with abortion, if the doctor doesn't deem it,
that your life is in danger,
you will not get an abortion.
Exactly.
But if you're rich, you can go to a private hospital and you can convince the doctor, because you can talk about mental health. The doctor can give this a very broad interpretation. What I am saying is the consequences of these provisions.
The reason the rich person has been able to access this is not because they went and said I have mental health issues. You can also go and say the same thing to a clinic somewhere.
Yes, but it's harder for somebody in the ghetto.
No, the doctor in a private, because they know.
I really wish we could have a doctor calling.
Because you know how far back you can bend this rule.
We've had statistics come in from CT where he said actually there are far fewer botched abortions and death resulting from botched abortions in countries where abortion is legal. So it's the illegality of it, the difficulty of procuring a safe abortion that leads, of course,
not
it goes
poverty.
without saying. What you'll find is you're able to find a health, if you have the money, you will find a health professional that is trained and qualified.
Why do you keep bringing the money aspects into
matters.
This discussion?
We have had somebody call in. Absolutely, it matters.
No.
People cannot
botched
afford healthy
abortions are not cheap.
They are cheap. They are much cheaper than actually going to a private hospital.
Okay.
This is what I'm saying. So public hospitals should be able to provide them. It should be easy and accessible for women to have safe abortions.
That person who's procuring that botched abortion, that is not
a quack
cheap.
doctor.
No,
it is much cheaper than a proper doctor, and also it's access to a proper doctor, to a qualified doctor, to a qualified healthcare professional.
No, simply, Jerry, do you have facts to support what you're saying? This rich poor thing, you're pushing the agenda. Do you have facts to support it?
I think some things we can see the common sense and we can see the consequences of actions. When we talk about 120 women having to go to be hospitalized every year as a result of botched abortions, generally speaking, rich people can afford qualified practitioners.
Are we saying that these botched abortions came because people didn't have money to go to a qualified doctor?
Absolutely.
It's these quack access to a public facility.
Yes,
again,
these doctors.
The findings of WHO on the very things that Nyeri is asserting here were not limited. They didn't even mention rich versus poor. Lack of legislation on proper delivery services, legal provision not fully understood, unmet needs for family planning, unmet needs for unintended teen pregnancies. These are some of the reasons.
Okay, and if you have money, if you have money, you are not
the
going
underpinning
to go to a
issue
quack.
here was
You're less
stigma.
If you have, the stigma is there, definitely. Now, if you have money, you're less likely to go to a quack doctor. If your teenage daughter gets pregnant, you're going to take her to a qualified practitioner who is going to carry out this abortion.
Assuming she's told you.
If we're looking in,
yes, of
in
course,
Kenya, assuming she's told you, and assuming that you're comfortable to go that. But we've also said that a lot of the cases that we've seen are young women who have hidden this from their parents, who would, as you say, take them to a qualified doctor. They've hidden this. So now, if they're part of that 120, then it really is not the issue of having money or not. It is the issue that they don't want that shame or stigma to be attached to them. And now what I am saying is that if this door is opened, we're going to open up the door even wider for people to say, all right, I'm going to go and get an abortion because I can.
The door is open. People are having abortions. We need to legalize it so we can regulate. This is what I'm saying. The door is open. People are having abortions.
86%.
464,000 women. Absolutely. 460. Eric, don't speak over me. 464,000
Jerry, you speak
women.
over people
That's
all the
fine.
time.
They can tell me to stop. I'm telling Eric to stop. 464,000 women had abortions. So this provision is not stopping abortion.
Now let me take that number and help you out with something.
Illegal abortions whereby women are dying.
Of that 450,000
that you to protect life.
Jerry,
Jerry,
of that 450,000 that you speak of, 76% of those are repeat abortions.
That is fine. That is another debate. Still, they still have a right to have their lives protected. Even if it's the 10th time you're having an abortion, you have a right to have your life protected.
The issue,
fact that
is it about protection of life?
Absolutely.
Or about getting rid of a pregnancy?
No. It's ensuring
two different things that we're talking about.
Two different
things that we're talking about here.
It is ensuring that people have safe abortions. They're going to have their abortions anyway. Now let us ensure that their abortions are safe. Because 464,000 isn't a small number of people having abortions in this country. So it is happening. This provision banning abortions, or this right to life and life beginning at conception, it is not stopping the abortions from happening. What is happening is people are going to quack doctors, backdoor abortions, and people are having unsafe abortions, and even longer term abortions, whereby people are having abortions at 8 months and so on, which is now a baby, and the ethical considerations come into term. So the fact that this constitution bans abortion, so to speak, with the exception of some scenarios, it doesn't stop abortion. So we need to revisit it and look at the intention. The government has a right to save lives. Women are losing their lives because of this provision. And most of those women fall into a certain demographic.
Well, the conversation is happening this week at KICC, the ICPD 25. Of course, we've seen people who are pro-life and pro-choice coming out. The U.S. ambassador to Kenya, Kyle McCarter, has come out and said global bureaucrats have absolutely no business attacking the sovereignty of nations that wish to protect innocent lives. Like many nations here today, we in America believe that every child born and unborn is a sacred gift. And of course, there are those that say, well, there are abortions that are happening. And it's a fact, yes, there are very many abortions that are happening. So what do we do about that as well? Conversation happens, and that's where the conversation is happening at KICC, the ICPD 25. The conversation continues on our social media handles, hashtag The Situation Room, and also on Facebook. The Situation Room is on Spice FM KE on Facebook, and our website is www.spicefm.co.ke. Good morning, 17 minutes after 8.
Spice and everything nice, everything nice.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
In Nairobi, it's 94.4. Mombasa, 87.9. Malindi, 97.7. Nyeri, 90.9. Eldoret, 96.7. And Nakuru, 96.0. And 102.5 in Kisumu. This is Spice FM. Sugar and spice and everything nice. 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every morning. You're with us, Eric Latif, Siti Muga, Jerry Thona, and Nduoko in the Situation Room. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. And the conversation continues. Now, this time, let's talk about what happened in Kibera last week. We saw, of course, the by-election that saw Imran Okoth elected as the Kibera MP. And of course, it was a heated campaign season with ODM and Jubilee and Amani National Congress and Ford Kenya. And those are four. 23 minus 4, 19 other candidates were there. Some independent, some sponsored by political parties. Now, of course, in the run-up to the Thursday by-election, there was a lot of, hubris and talk and political rhetoric and some incidences, limited incidences of violence, but there were incidences of violence. Vehicles stoned. Somebody had died during the campaigns because they fell off a moving vehicle because it was running, because it was, the vehicle was moving at speed because some people were stoning the vehicles as well. Then on the day of the by-election, we saw some incidences of violence. We have seen the images in our media and social media as well of, for example, MP Didymus, who was roughed up for a bit by some group of people. And then, of course, we saw incidences where people like Junaid Mohammed, the director of elections for ODM, saying we have met some people who are distributing some cash and trying to buy voters, and we've told them to go and take back the money to the owner, and the party leaders have told us they've taken the money back to the owner. So there were incidences back and forth of electoral malpractice. We cannot deny that there were incidences, of course, of pockets of violence. And then the rhetoric began after the election results were announced. And we saw over the weekend the Deputy President William Ruto going around at a public rally in Narok, somewhere in Narok, and saying, what we have seen in Kibra, what we've witnessed in Kibra is a typical thing that we see with ODM, that they have a tendency to violence. And this is something that Raila Odinga should come out, and ODM as a party should come out and apologize to the people of Kenya and the people of Kibra for the incidences of violence that we saw. Of course, he got a response from the ODM Secretary General, Edwin Sifuna, who said, Shauri yako, we are not apologizing for anything. There's absolutely nothing that we've done. So just a bit of here and there and what was happening. This is what William Ruto, the Deputy President, said.
We are a nation of law, not a nation of men. And we are saying, without fear of contradiction, that ODM must be called out. And we must tell them that the violence they meted out to innocent Kenyans, including leaders in Kibra, they have to apologize to the people of Kenya. They have to apologize to the people of Kibra for the mayhem and violence visited on them by organized Baba goons that carried out that mayhem in Kibra.
Now, Deputy President, how can you talk about violence? Wewe, ile jibwa lako la kike la kule Kwale iliingia kwa nyumba ya candidate wetu Waganda akapiga mtu risasi akakufa. Kabla uitishe sisi apology, tunataka kusikia apology ya watu ambao ulichoma ndani ya kanisa kule Kiambaa. Kabla hujatuitisha sisi apology, tunataka kusikia apology yako kuhusu mashamba ya watu ambao umeiba Kenya hii. Ulipiga watoto wetu tear gas hapa Lang'ata, hatujasikia ukisema apology. Kwa hiyo mustari ya watu ambao wanaenda kutoa apology, mtu wa kwanza ni William Ruto.
Political rhetoric is back, and that's my issue this morning. We have seen politicians doing, we call it politicians doing what politicians do. But then, what politicians do, we have seen where it has led us before. And this, basically what I'm seeing has happened in Kibra, is a precursor to what's going to happen in 2022 again. We are normalizing it. We are getting to a point where we're becoming desensitized. We see it as funny when one leader stands up and says, there was violence and we want you to stop getting violent. And then the other one saying, but you are the baba of violence. This kind of political rhetoric and normalization of it by the population is what's wrong. And that's what I'm discussing this morning and saying, it needs to stop. It needs to change. We need to tell the leaders, enough is enough. Go and campaign. We are going to come and make our choice at the ballot. Go back home. If you have an issue, take it to court or through other proper channels.
When political pronouncements are made, I think the makers of these pronouncements very rarely imagine that the very pronouncements will come back and bite them. That the very pronouncements they have used will be used on them at some point or the other. In this, from the presentation you've made, if we talk about the culture of, not politics, but the culture of losing an election, or the aftermath of an election, you can actually foretell with accuracy what will be said. What the losing side will say and what the winning side will say. Yes. But what is important, and this is what I will be talking about, is the arena to which they are playing. This theater of the absurd is actually played in the public domain. The consumers of this particular product is the public. And again, I will be talking about this again, but what we heard, those two clips, falls under something that is called framing. You ensure you actually structure what you are to say well, and you introduce whatever it is that you expect to support what you want to make early, and you state it. This has happened. This has happened. This has happened, and then you present the case and say, "This is what it is. These things I have said. This is what it is." It's not new in our politics, and at the center of it is always the issue of people who are anti-development. People who are subverting something that we Kenyans, and remember, every politician speaks on behalf of this citizenry. They never say I. It's always we, the citizens of Kenya, apologize to the country, apologize to Kenyans.
Not to us.
No, it's not them. They're representing the wishes of the people. Now, that's where the clever framing comes.
Not we apologize.
It's not you. In fact, the individual saying it is very far removed. It is the people. The people who have been disturbed. And then you throw in an example. Good public servants who are doing what they're supposed to do. But if we move away from those utterances and you look at what was in our print media today, the headlines on all the media, the papers was that the people aligned to a certain key politician had moved the attack from ODM and had now moved to attacking the government minister and the permanent secretary attached to a certain ministry. It's just that the focus has changed. The rhetoric is not.
It's the same.
It's no different.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's leading us to something that is dangerous. It's a build-up. It's happened prior to 2007. We saw that build-up. After the 2005 referendum, of course, there was now the galvanization of political movements, and we saw the kind of rhetoric that was happening, both from now the newly formed ODM, and then from the PNU, the newly formed PNU side of government. And that kind of rhetoric was actually building up. By the time we were getting to the 2007 polls, the nation was already polarized. The ground was rife for anything to happen. And it did happen. And we saw it happen. It's the same thing that I'm seeing happening here again. So, of course, we had already said that the Kibra by-election was not just a Kibra by-election for constituency. It was also a national political conversation. And the national political conversation that happened is continuing now. It did not end well. People of Kibra went, voted, picked their leader. Nobody has gone to court. There has been no petition that has been filed. So why do we still have Kibra happening after that? It's because people are building up towards what they are going to do in 2022. We are normalizing this. We are saying, well, yeah, the politicians are doing it. It's right. It's wrong. It's wrong.
If you look at the focus, just the focus, one actually forgot that there were other by-elections taking place. I mean, this was for constituency, but we had
civic by-elections.
Yes, taking place. But and there was one gentleman who died in Kibra, but he fell from a moving car. This news, because it's in Kibra, seemed to have taken more center stage than the one in Malindi, where someone was actually shot and died.
And killed.
At a rally.
Yes. So also, remember, rhetoric is the art of persuasion. Huh? That's what it is. But though in this country, rhetoric is considered to be synonymous with propaganda. The two are not the same. They play into each other and more or less aim to achieve the same results, but they are not the same thing. If you are talking about the ground being set, I'm afraid I would argue that the tempo is actually rising. This particular ground was set when we had the referendum for the Constitution. This is where it actually all began. Yes, because people took sides. And if you look at the formation of the sides that were then taken, remember on this very same show I have mentioned, it's just a realignment. It's not anything new. Again, people forming new alignments. When we got to the referendum, if you look at the alignment we had then, it looks like that alignment is being repeated again here.
Again.
Yes. People who are on the yes side and people who are on the no side. Just think about it for a second and look at the players at that particular
forming full circle.
Yes. So it begins there.
We were talking about the normalization of violence during elections. Then, Eric, are we now saying that it's something that is expected to happen and that it should not be the case? If we do that, then aren't we then saying that there's certain factions that then have a propensity towards violence and then furthering what could be prejudice, a stereotype in that sense?
No, I'm actually not even talking about the factions. So there were cases of, electoral malpractice. There were allegations and accusations from one side that you guys are coming and you're trying to bribe voters. Voter bribery is an electoral malpractice in law. Action should be taken against such to nip such in the bud.
Violence should be the same.
Right? Electoral violence should also be the same. Let's not talk about, the reason why we were doing this is because, well, we were protecting our vote, and so we beat one or two people. What's the big deal? I mean, there's just one or two people that we dealt with. Why are we dealing with just one or two people? Why are we saying that it's okay because we only dealt with one or two people? There are people who we haven't mentioned, the people who we did not see in the media clips who also got affected by the violence. There are people whose opportunity to go and choose a leader was hampered by this kind of rhetoric and buying of votes and all that nonsense. Why did we allow that to happen?
Eric, buying of votes, I don't know how this can be tamed. If we cannot implement, is there not a capping of how much can be spent in election in this country? Is it just the constitution, has it been made law? I mean, at what stage are we with this? But as far as I know, even Harambes were prohibited at some point.
Yes.
Was it something legal, or was it just something that was stated and weighed and expressed in public? If you cannot control the amounts that people spend in an election, you cannot control bribery.
You can't.
You can't. So you might, in my opinion, don't even bother having the discussion. Choose another discussion to choose something else to talk about.
So what do you do? So you just allow people to come in and...
No. You ensure that these limits that you supposedly said, whatever millions you said, are actually met. And this is not difficult to quantify. You know how much T-shirts cost. You know what it costs to have leaflets or whatever it is, bags, caps. You know what these things cost.
Transportation.
All that.
Stage.
Yes. And if people are... You see, like with every budget, when you go for election, you have a budget. That's why people raise money. Because you know what you want to spend the money on. Okay? I do not think if you look at any election setup that there is an item clearly written bribery. There's none. It'll be logistics.
This is the situation with Kenya's biggest conversation at 8:30. Let's take a look at what's happening on the roads. Good morning.
Spice and everything nice. All right.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
Right, so you can use the South B route if you're headed into the CBD, because using Mombasa Road alone is going to cause some problems, and South B is actually, that route through South B is actually flowing quite smoothly. Now that the Westlands roundabout has been closed once again, traffic is flowing and all things are well in Westlands. So perhaps that will be closed permanently. We don't know. Let's wait and see. All right, things on Outer Ring Road are not looking too fantastic right now. Traffic is at a gridlock and not moving. So if you're there, you're going to have to wait it out, unfortunately. Langata Road still remains the same. It's moving, crawling along as it were, trying to get down into town. Yesterday was hectic. You're going to have to prepare for the day that is ahead. There was traffic all over the city the whole day. We'll let you know if anything changes, but for now we still have a bit of a crawling situation on Thika Road as well. If you started off early, you're going to be there for a while. Take it easy. Remember, it is wet and there's some parts of the city that are actually a bit foggy, so take it easy as you're getting in and out, getting your business done. 0719 012 600 is the number to call. Talk to us on Twitter as well, and let's see how we can keep you moving this morning.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
27 to 9. Good morning and thank you for choosing Kenya's biggest conversation. I'm Eric Latif. We have Siti Muga, Jerry Thorne, and Nduoko. We're discussing the aftermath of the Kibra by-election last week. And of course, we saw over the weekend, and since then, up to now, even today, we're seeing some leaders allied to Jubilee, one faction of Jubilee, saying, well, why is the Interior CS not investigating incidences of violence? Number one. Number two, they have allegations now that the Interior CS had met with the leadership of ODM prior to this by-election.
In a hotel, of course.
In
a hotel.
Okay.
Well, this time they were not plotting the assassination of anybody, but they were just, they were having
they were
conversation
planning how the violence would be carried out and there would be no prosecution.
Yes. And what I'm saying is this, and of course we saw the response from ODM and the ODM leadership led by, of course, the party leader Raila Odinga, the other leaders, Junaid Mohammed, the director of elections, the Secretary General Edwin Sifuna, saying, look, there was no violence in Kibra. What we saw was a very organized scheme by the party to protect the votes. But if you want to talk about violence, William Ruto, and they went on William Ruto. There was incidents of somebody who was shot in Malindi.
Why was there no apology? Well,
and demanding an apology. And let's go back to why was there no apology from any leadership
at that time
about Malindi? Now we are demanding an apology in Kibra. Why? We're going back all the way even to 2007, where there was a post-election violence and a sad and unfortunate incident of people who were torched when they were seeking refuge at a church in Kiambaa.
Perhaps there's some merit in that demand, really, to say, if we're in the business now of making apologies when it comes to election violence, then is it something that we have just put on in terms of a cloth today or in light of recent events? And why have we not worn that apologetic stance in the past? And maybe it's something that, okay, well, if we're going to be apologizing, well, then let's get all these apologies then out of the hat and apply them across board.
Historical apologies.
Well, let's get it done, man. If this is what we're talking about, let's start.
There was this commission that we had, wasn't it?
I thought you were going to say there was a commission of apology.
No. It was a commission of apology.
Right.
Because
TJRC.
Yes, when you want to set historical wrongs right, that's what it is. It is a ministry of apology.
Yes, restoration, restitution.
But you see now, if you look at rhetoric as a discipline, and how it is taught, and the people to whom it is taught, and the people it influences. I mean, you are talking about the largest group of people, okay, from lawyers, counselors, historians, statesmen, poets. Part of their training, there's an intrinsic aspect of rhetoric that is taught to them. Now, if you have been taught well, you will know how to frame whatever it is you want to put across and understand the consequences of whatever it is that you're saying. But if you do not, then you will say things that seem to suit your purpose, and then people will come with a rebuttal. And the rebuttal will be actually framed on what you started. And it will cause an avalanche, and it can destabilize you in ways that you hadn't anticipated. Yes. So it's something that you must manage well. It works well if you know how to frame it. For instance, the framing of the perennial loser and the complaints that ODM have, it was well framed because the consistency of losses by that particular party was established. It was a fact. They had lost many elections. Now, the narrative that they had was also the same. So if you have a lot of things being said and it's being said the same way, you can say, but they're always saying
true.
But they're always saying this. Yes, whenever this happens, they're saying this.
They say this.
There's correlation to it. So you founded it well. Now, anything that comes thereafter can easily be believed because you're saying, but this is true. This is also true. So, by extension, this must also be true. Now, that's where propaganda comes in. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to be a version of the truth, and it'll be believed as the truth.
And unfortunately, if you want to look at how this election was carried out overall, I mean, generally, and I think to a very large percent, it was peaceful. Look, the election took place. People went, they voted. A winner was declared. There were concessions that were made. There were congratulatory phone calls that were made. Yes, thank you very much. We moved on. Suffice to say that somebody had to look for something to muddy the waters. Unfortunately, somebody had to look for something to make it not really as fine as it was. Why is it that's so difficult for us to accept that election carried out, somebody won, and we didn't see
do you know why
as difficult a situation as we had seen previously?
Do you know what the BBI is exactly trying
bad.
to do? This question that you're asking, if I were to believe the proponents of the BBI, this is what they're trying to avert. Because our current presidential system is what leads to this thing that you're hearing. People will not accept
it.
Even if all the facts are in.
And everybody, even the person who lost is saying, okay, it was carried out well, but you still want to bring in an issue and make it an issue where there's not an issue. There was an election, it was carried out well, people voted, let's move on. But no, we want to still stay in one place and still grind and grumble.
Have you had anybody bringing the IEBC into this discussion?
Nobody talked about IEBC. IEBC came out smelling like a rose. Apart from the voter register issue.
No.
Apart from the register issue, not a problem. But still, we call it sore losers, unfortunately. That's what we're looking at now. Because, you know, how many candidates did you mention?
23.
Did we hear out of those other camps complaints that were coming out?
Yes.
What did we hear?
Violence.
out of the other 20. Okay, now in this case would be 2022.
Well, not all of them out of the other 22, right?
Eric, why is it that when political violence is spoken of in this country, except the really bizarre case of what we saw happening to that student from JKU why is it that people may exhibit outrage, but people tend to find humor in it? Why?
Normalization of political violence. That's what I'm talking about.
People laugh when you talk about someone, like there were pictures of a certain prominent politician carrying stones. I mean, peals of laughter could be heard. I said, my goodness, what she was. And it's supposed to be a joke. When you're told about some prominent people escaping from some Kibera houses through the roof, people laugh to the point of collapse.
Yep.
This actually, in reality, isn't actually funny. Because people do that when they think their life is in danger.
At that point, that person is actually running away. He's fleeing something.
He's fleeing.
And the point when somebody loses his hat, his traditional, trademark hat, and he takes off, and then another politician comes wearing a similar hat, I don't know whether it's the same hat, to a public rally and says, I found this one somewhere, and the owner of it can come looking for it. We're making fun of it. But listen, we are normal, and that's what I said. We are normalizing these incidences, and once we do that,
or we're normalizing complaints, and we're saying that after an election, even when everything has happened as smoothly as it should be, somebody has got to complain about something.
No, we are fanning impunity.
We're fanning
impunity. Even that case where there are people who are being beaten. It shouldn't be a case where we see a photo of somebody holding a stone and somebody else trying to duck from a rock, a huge rock. Why are we seeing that?
I mean, think of the case of this student who was clearly violated in the worst possible case scenario. If we didn't have that particular social media, that thing could just have gone.
Right, and nobody would have known about it, spoken about it.
And what makes you think he is the only one who was cornered and beaten like a snake?
He just happened to have been the only one that was captured on camera.
Yes. But we've had cases where the University of Nairobi, students were lined up, social media again.
Yep.
And they received the same amount of beating. Same. Now, it's part of the normalization I think Eric is speaking about, and this is something that must be spoken out against.
We can't continue operating as if it's normal. Yes, there are two things that we are normalizing. One, we're normalizing, at the end of any election, you go to a political rally and complain. Go to court. Look, there are procedures and there are avenues for you to complain. If you actually have incidences where you feel that there was a violation of the electoral practice, go to court, go raise it in court and say, this is what happened and I want to accuse this person and the other. You can't tell Matiang'i to investigate when you haven't complained about it. Is there a complaint? Has there a complaint have
you brought anything before his office and said, please go ahead and investigate
this?
So now you've called him out, but in this, apparently there was a meeting that was held at a hotel where some kind of protectionism was promised.
Yep.
And according to the allegations that are being made, and then you now call upon the man to do something for which you've not made a complaint about. What are we doing here? That's what I'm saying. Are they really serious in the demands in which that they're making? This apology and this call for prosecution or call for at least investigation into these cases. Are they serious? Are we putting out a sentiment in there once again, propaganda, to sway the public to begin to think in a particular manner? I mean, I understand that you have certain powers as a politician, but then again, some of these things should be checked. If not checked, we should then be aware of what is actually happening when some of these pronouncements are being made. It has become normal and it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be.
It should not be.
Actually, ask yourself, what process do you think this follows before it actually becomes the order of the day?
It must have happened over and over.
But in this country, we don't have to look far. We have talked to the point of getting hoarse in the voice with regards to the pilferage of public funds. How did we move from it being something that was shameful to a point where the shame was actually in being caught, not in committing the crime? How did we progress to the point where we got there? Because that's where we've been.
All right. I mean, like I said, it happened over and over again, and nobody thought to do anything about it. Nobody spoke about it.
When you coin a phrase to explain something, blatant thief, when you call it tenderpreneur, do you know what you've done? You've normalized it. And people use that phrase as normal as they talk about breathing and as they talk about drinking water. So, if our politics has followed suit, it's not a worrying trend. Hey.
It becomes a normal thing.
Yes, it is a normal thing, but that normalcy is not just worrying, it's actually dangerous.
What should we do about that? Now, that's what I was saying. We, the people, so fine, the politicians are doing what they're doing, and we, the people, are sitting there and like sort of cheering them on. And this is why I'm saying, no. We need to take a stand and say, listen, the electoral process is a process that I want to participate in a safe environment. And I do not want you to come and tell me about violence. If you have incidences of violence, go as a party leader, go and report these incidences of violence. If you have issues of voter bribery, as a party leader, as a party leadership, go and report this. Do not come to a political rally and make it like, it's the rhetoric of the day, yet there's nothing that you're doing behind that.
When people talk about bribery, it's one of those things that is talked about during and after an election, even before, and then it dies. Have you ever wondered why? Because literally everybody practices it.
Exactly. That's it. Everybody practices it, and then without, any kind of fear that it would be looked down upon, because it has really become part and parcel of what is done and and what is said. And so it becomes the normal thing, just the same way we can talk about huge amounts of money that don't seem to be an issue anymore. We started in the hundreds of thousands, we went to the millions, to the hundreds of millions, and then we got into the billions. And it's normal, and it's not an issue for anybody anymore. It is practiced, it is accepted, and so it becomes normal.
It's among the things that we've normalized in this country. It's a culture of impunity. Anything goes, well, it becomes once, twice, becomes fun, it becomes normal. In fact, now the next thing we start saying is, why don't you just accept this and find a way of fitting it within our system?
Eric, do you think the citizens of Kenya think it is actually illegal if someone has been found stealing something for them to beat that person to a pulp?
It's not.
Yes, but it is. But is it legal? No, it isn't.
It's actually not
They're actually committing a crime.
Taking law into their own hands.
Yes, they do. But they do not think. We spoke the other day about the disadvantages of and discrimination that is sometimes meted on women. You wear a garment that suits your purposes, you have nice legs and you do not mind showing them, and you wear a garment called a miniskirt. And some uninformed goons decide to attack you. Why? Do you think they would actually dare even come near you and talk to you if they knew that the consequences would be dire?
Of course not.
Precisely.
Impunity.
Yes.
0719 012 600. 0719 012 600. We're talking about the culture of impunity in our elective politics.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Broadcasting to Mombasa as well, 87.9, and Nakuru 96.0, Eldoret 96.7, 90.9 in Nyeri, 97.7 in Malindi, and Kisumu on 102.5. We're talking about the culture of impunity in our politics. Now, looking at just going by what happened in Kibra over the last week, we saw, of course, the people of Kibra went and 24,000 of them voted for Imran Okoth, 11,000 voted for Jubilee candidate McDonald Mariga, 5,000 voted for Eli Dowalo of ANC, and the others got the other votes below 5,000. Ford Kenya leadership, Ford Kenya had a candidate, and there were other candidates as well. 24 candidates in total. But over the weekend, then we saw the kind of rhetoric that was coming out of it. Of course, Jubilee, that had sponsored McDonald Mariga, and the Deputy President, William Ruto, who's the Deputy Party Leader, going out and saying we saw incidences of violence on the election day, and ODM and the leadership of ODM must apologize to the people of Kibra and the people of Kenya. Of course, it was met by the rhetoric from the ODM leadership. Secretary General Edwin Sifuna saying, before we start demanding for apology for what happened here when we were protecting our votes, can we go back into look? There was a campaign in Malindi, a civic ward in Malindi. Somebody was shot dead. There were incidences of violence in 2007 at a church in Kiambaa. People died. We did an apology for that. You shot our children in Langata during the 2017 election. People were shot when they were demonstrating about the outcome of the election. How come we haven't had any apology there? So why do you want an apology from us today?
Yes, rhetoric has come back. And you never know when it's going to come back and bite you. And you don't know how powerful that bite is actually going to be. But, ask yourself a simple question. Do you really think this rhetoric actually sways voters? Because at the end of the day, it's intended to give the voter an impression that one side is better than the other. Does it sway the voters?
It incenses the voter.
Yes, but does it
make them make the decision differently than they would?
Yes, does it influence electoral outcomes?
I'm not sure it does influence electoral outcomes. I think what it does is it influences the process, the whole electoral process. So you see, the electoral process, from the moment that seat is declared vacant and the campaigns begin, it should be peaceful, where you should be able to welcome a candidate to come and tell you, this is what I think, and this is how I intend to serve you. We then, because we've been polarized, do not allow any other kind of conversation apart from those from our leaders and from our side. And that's what happens with this kind of rhetoric. Do not listen to anybody else, only listen to me. We are going in this direction. If these people come, well, if they bring money, cooler. But if they are asking you for their vote, don't vote. And on the day when they're coming with the money, if on the day of the elections, beat them up and send them back to their masters. This is actually interfering with a peaceful electoral process.
You know, one could argue that if the electoral process is, say, a by-election, that the results are more or less predetermined. Because, again, this is my point of view. Voters have a very clear idea of who they want to vote for and why they want to vote for this person. And so, in a by-election specifically, no amount of electioneering rhetoric will actually sway them. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because if you look at any by-election we've had in our elections, where, say, for instance, someone has passed away, and one of the people who's contending for the seat is either a sister, brother, or a wife.
Yes.
That particular person who's related to them is most likely to win in that particular seat.
Because they're likened to the person who was there previously.
Yes. And there's a thinking, and there are even statements to that effect that let this person finish the term. It was given to this person. Some argue, well, it's theirs. Let them continue with it. Others say, let's support the party because it's a party that got into it. But the net result is, you can more or less certainly say that if we're to go by these patterns, the people who are related to those whose seats are now going through this by-election are most likely to win.
And do you think that those who are in opposition, then if that be laid claim, those then who are in opposition to this individual, or to the party that supports this individual, don't they know this as well going in?
I don't think that any electioneering process and the and the ethos around it allows you to think like that. It's a competition, and it's something
we're going to try our luck.
You must definitely remember this. Again, the media played a very, very important role in hyping the Kibra election and making it a huge national debate and an issue, because we are not talking about it a competition, something that is a forerunner to 2022 now. Again, a media construct. This is the big battle between the deputy president and the former prime minister. It's the media presenting the information. There's an ODM contest and there's a Jubilee candidate as well as an ODM and other parties. You would not think that there were other people in this election.
No.
In fact, the person who actually got a mention now was the ANC's candidate, Owalo. Yes, but apart from that, the others, if I were to ask you, beyond the fourth candidate, who are the others? You won't even try. You just say, I don't know.
We just call them the other 19.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are many.
We call them the
Nobody
other 19.
knows them.
That's true.
Yes. The reason is the parties, in fact, what is true is that the candidates and the popularity was actually represented the popularity or the visibility or the supposed strength of the parties that they were representing. Jubilee is the party that is actually in charge of this particular country at the moment. And the greatest opposition had been NASA, but ODM is the strongest of the partners. So, again, the rhetoric would follow that because these are the people who are better known, who have a bigger political say. So, their voices will be heard louder. Now, the media helps this. Why am I saying this? Think of a situation where all the media did was report.
As it is.
Just report. There are how many candidates? 23 candidates. They're called so and so and so and so and so and so. And we are now waiting for the elections. Finished.
If there was nothing else beyond that.
Well, they've told you, give you the background, say what they're going to do, and then leave it at that.
Leave it at that.
But no. there has to be a story.
Soup cannot be bland now. You have to add salt and pepper.
Of course.
Yeah, and depending on which part of the world you come from, it's not just pepper. There are people who have an entire dish that is just a variation of different peppers. The entire food is, yes, green, brown, yellow chili. It's just chilies.
All join.
Yes, so.
City, was there any, would you say there was justification, for example, to see leaders from one party, in this case ODM, right, going in somewhere and standing and witnessing as another leader is actually being clobbered? And then we come back there and we make fun of it and say, there cannot be any apology from Simba Arati to Didimas Barasa because, why was he there? This is what was happening.
To answer that question, you just need to listen to the entire speech that the Secretary General of ODM made and what he said. As far as if we are to go by what he said, he was simply saying, look, we didn't start this. You've shot our people, you've done this, you've done the other. What are you kicking a fuss? We haven't killed anybody. And this violence you speak of, what is this thing? He's saying essentially, compared to what you've done, what are you talking about? That's what he's saying. Now, that's what I was saying was dangerous because now we are comparing levels of violence. Not the absence or the complete negation of it, but varieties of it. Now, that is extremely dangerous.
At the risk of sounding as a supporter of violence, then can we see elections really then with what we've seen? Is it possible then to have elections without an element of violence? However, however menial or however low it is to however possible. High, is it possible to see elections then without that kind of violence? If the kind of propaganda that has been taken from series of historical happenings and then now that being used even as a tool to say that it's going to happen, if we see that as it's been played out over time, then if we're going to go ahead and move with what the narrative of the day is, then we can say elections, then we must understand that coming an election, there's going to be violence, and it's something that you should accept even before the election takes place. Again, because that seems to be what the conversation or how the conversation is flowing.
In this same room, we talked about how it is these illegal organizations get a foothold into society. One of the things that is often pointed out is that they provide a service that the government is supposed to, but the government doesn't do a very good job of. One of them is security. You think of any gang where in this city. People talk about Mungiki. There are many other gangs. Mungiki just happens to be probably one of the most organized of that lot. But what services do they provide? If you think about it, if people were up in arms and didn't want those services, believe me, they would not actually exist. They wouldn't.
Just having a need.
Yes, they bring some order. Now, you may debate about the way they go about bringing the order, but they do bring some order that people appreciate. When you have a situation where people feel they are more in danger when they come across policemen than when they come across these people, then we do have a problem here. But with those people, they're certain. If you pay your 10 bob per day,
you're sorted.
You're
fine. You're fine.
You can come home any time of the night. If you have an electricity problem, so long as you don't ask where it comes from, you'll have electricity. Yes,
it will be there.
Yeah, it will be there. If your wife goes and complains that you're beating her, they have a court where they will
sort him out. Yeah.
Right there.
So all I'm saying is, there are legal issues that probably are crosshairs. But the truth of the matter is, these organizations exist because there is a demand for a certain service and it isn't provided. But they are not legal entities. They are not providing the services that legally they should, but they do.
To answer Ndu's question, which she's asking, is it possible to have an election without these kind of incidences of violence?
Actually, I wasn't going about this in a roundabout way. I was actually speaking out a psychological background from which she can infer and then maybe arrive at a conclusion that she may find useful. But this is the yes or no question. All elections, with the exception of one or few where voters' boxes were found in Njoro River and God knows what happened, our elections tend to be extremely peaceful. And that's what fools our observers. They come and say, but those elections were peaceful. They were peaceful.
They were peaceful.
Everybody voted. Yes, everybody voted. And there were no problems. Of course, there were no problems. Our problem is after. That's where our problems usually are. So, the question you're asking is, can we have an entire process without violence?
Yes.
That's what you're asking, isn't it?
The entire process. The election is actually from that point when the seat is declared vacant, campaign starts,
thereafter.
all the way up to the point of a winner being declared.
You see the rhetoric that you're talking about. It more or less predisposes voters to believe that if you lose, something went wrong, even if nothing went wrong. Yes, meaning if you lose, you cannot accept you actually lost. So it makes Mariga a unique person. But the Deputy President is also unique because he was one of the key proponents for the no in the Constitution. But he conceded defeat. He said, okay, you guys have won. So it isn't that we haven't had situations where people have conceded. But then that one was interesting because when people get close to 70% of the votes,
you don't have a choice but to concede.
What are you again?
And one could argue the same. But it is not that somebody won or lost. Somebody understood, I have actually lost this contest, and they're willing to accept. Yes, now that willingness to accept is what
somebody has a problem with.
Where the problem is.
That's what you're asking.
I have an answer to Ndu's question. That yes, it is possible only if our leaders actually practice what they preach. The coming together of President Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto in 2012, ahead of the 2013 election, was that they were promising peaceful coexistence and peaceful elections for people. The same thing, the Building Bridges initiative is saying the same thing. It's trying to address why do we have acrimony. So it's possible to actually get the answer. Good morning. It's 9 o'clock.
Spice up your life.
Tinge Road is impassable for some reason all the way to Valley Arcade. It's traffic, and that is because people are trying to use an alternate route coming off of Ngong Road and coming behind the Junction Mall. So unfortunately, everybody got that bright idea. So now everybody's stuck at the Gitanga Road. Maybe Mombasa Road is doing a bit better. Not really. We still have a gridlock there all the way until the Nyayo Stadium coming out of the General Motors section of the road. All right. Coming out of Westlands, not so bad now that the roundabout has been closed, and coming off Thika Super Highway, at least some people have finally made it to the Globe Cinema, what was the Globe Cinema area, but we still have some traffic. Now we've moved up till at least Safari Park, where it is yes, bumper to bumper. The city centre is already chock-a-blocked because everybody's trying to get in and get some parking. Hopefully we'll get better by the end of tomorrow. Remember that we do have some road closures splattered around the city, and that is what is contributing to the heightened levels of traffic that we see everywhere you go. You find an alternate route, please do let us know. 0719 012 600.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Nyeri Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room. The only way to start
It's 2 minutes after 9 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in to The Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We're talking about political rhetoric, based on what we saw in Kibra and what we're seeing now. Politicians are coming left, right and center saying, action should have been taken against incidences of violence. The same politicians have not gone to report to the police to actually demand that investigations begin. They haven't gone to the IEBC to complain about electoral malpractice, incidences of alleged voter bribery and as well. Is this a precursor? Are we beginning to build up and get the ground ready for 2022 with what they want to be a very hated campaign? Do you see a link between this and 2022, Jerry?
Alignments. Yeah, I do see a link. In terms of the violence, you have to keep in mind that Kibra is quite volatile, and given the nature of what was going on, it wasn't just the by-election for the MP. It was also the sort of tussle for Raila's turf, and sort of reflective absolutely and reflective of what was going to happen in 2022. So it wasn't just the mere fact that it was a by-election. So I don't think we can actually sit down and say this is now normalizing violence, and I don't think we can say this is what's going to happen. You've got to understand the political undercurrents that Kibra involved, and CT talks about the fact that it might have been the media that was reporting it. But of course, media did some analysis. News Today is not simply telling us what's happening. We can get that off individual members of the public on Twitter and so on. So the media analyzed it, and it did pick up the political undercurrents, which for Ruto, it was a litmus test to test sort of his support. And also he managed to get the opportunity to have his opponents, political or otherwise, expose themselves by coming out in full light and supporting Raila Odinga. So I think there's a number of factors here that amplified this violence. First of all, of course, the fact that it's Kibra. I was going to say it's a hotbed of violence, but it's a very it's a very volatile constituency for a number of reasons, including sort of unemployment and some of the sort of setbacks that the residents face on a day-to-day basis, and then the fact that it's been Raila's backyard and now bedroom, and it was being fought over. That also comes into it. So I think there's a number of factors that brought violence to the fore.
But what would you say the conversation is ongoing 4 days, 5 days after the by-election happened?
By virtue of the conversation continuing, it's a reinforcement of what I'm talking about here, the fact that there's a lot at play here, including political realignments. It was not about a Kibra MP. It wasn't about Okoth or Mariga. Those were merely pawns, or not pawns. It was an opportunity that these leaders capitalized on. And 2022, yes, but I think prior to that, they might be the referendum. So I think political alignments were taking place. It was used as a platform to achieve a number of objectives, some of which I've highlighted, the political realignments. In terms of violence, I don't think there was as much violence as we've actually seen in other elections, to be honest.
There was more violence when Sonko went to EACC the other day, and there were people on the street at Integrity Center. So I don't even understand what we're talking about.
There was no.
But here's a unique. I said
more
there was
violence?
more. There was more.
More violence.
Yeah, I mean, the more cases of what we see, eruptions of, small eruptions that happened here and there. Or maybe we were talking about what was reported.
We saw many people accompanying Sonko. Did we see violence?
But
not really.
Okay, what I want to say is that here's a unique opportunity then to test the systems or the instruments of power, judiciary, that are enshrined in the government. Now, if you have an issue and you say there's been violence, take it to the court and let them be the ones then to deem whether it happened or not. And then they can now say, will they prosecute? Will allegations be made? Will there be prosecutions? What will be done? All this talking that we're doing in public, maybe not, getting somebody demanding for an apology. What are we doing?
There's a pattern to this.
Yes. So if we're saying that there was, now test and see if the instruments of government actually work. Go to court.
There is a pattern.
Lay your claim.
There is a pattern to this. And it isn't, it isn't foolhardy. It isn't as though there's no substance to actually support that particular perspective. Remember, in 2017, what we saw coming out of Kibra was a lot of violence after the results were announced and the thing that followed thereafter. There was a lot of it. This wasn't this mild garden variety violence. People actually died, okay?
Yeah.
Now, if you look at what was the rhetoric, this particular leader and his people are violent. They are prone to violence, okay? Swiftly moving forward, 2019, we have this by-election. You're hearing the same thing. These are violent people.
This particular leader.
And his people. Remember, the Baba Goons, you even profile them.
The Baba Goons,
yes. Same rhetoric as we had before. These people. So, essentially, what is not being said, these are not people to be trusted, because this is how they go about their business. Now, look at what it has elicited. Look at the response it has elicited. It has taken the discussion and said, okay, Okay, so you now want to look at the speck in my eye. Why don't we take a look at the log?
The log in your
eye.
So now we change the conversation into that.
Yes. So if this is where you've taken this discussion, then let's take it to that discussion. Let's meet now. These discussions, I think it is Nyeri who keeps saying that they're a precursor. They lay the ground. That's what rhetoric does. And with rhetoric now will come propaganda, where you're now not speaking to people's logic, you're speaking to their emotions. And that's why I asked the question, does it really affect
the outcomes of
us? Yes. Is the voter impressed enough to actually change the way they have predetermined they're going to vote? And my answer to this one is no.
David Weswa on Facebook says, very true. Personally, I wouldn't blame politicians on one side of the coin. It's the voters who should mature up. And on the other side, politicians should be prosecuted for such rhetoric. But unfortunately, it's not possible because it's them, the politicians, who legislate the laws. So in short, tuendelee kuwana kijinga jinga tu. Marurit Kemboi says, violence is a trademark of Kenyan elections and Kibra is no exception. While Victor Oluoch says violence was normalized when 2007 people were burnt in a church and a house when we forcefully circumcised some people and left, then those not charged the perpetrators because it was politically inconvenient. Violence was also further normalized when police were used to terrorize opposition supporters in 2017. If Kenya is to change, we must start with these, not to forget the excesses during the Moi era.
There's no criminal liability in rhetoric anymore. That was removed from the penal code, even if it's defamation. So if you're going to court, you're suggesting, or the reader, the caller, or the person writing on Facebook, the listener, is suggesting that we take these guys to court for their utterances?
Yes.
Because there's no sort of, it can be insightful in terms of it can conjure up emotions of hate and discontent and excitement, anger and so on, but there's no hate speech there. They're pretty much recalling what happened previously.
But also I think hate speech goes beyond that, just calling somebody by their name or by their tribe. It also goes into incitement.
Yes, but
so if you're talking about, for example,
incitement, I suppose, could be subjective, in
completely.
that something might incite me that might not incite and do. So here, so long as you can prove that this is a widely held belief, what the assertions that I made or the utterances that I made whilst on stage, there's really no crime that you've committed, but recalling the past and something that's in the public domain anyway and has been discussed widely, globally, even if you're looking back at 2007 and the accusations made there towards the DP. So
remember, when these utterances are made, like the utterance the DP made, he doesn't address the party ODM, he addresses the leader. Now, why this will elicit an emotional response is the people who support ODM support the leader. So they will not, unfortunately, take kindly to someone who they feel is attacking the leader.
Yes.
So their response can almost be predetermined. You can more or less say, as a result of what they consider to be an attack, they will
react in this way.
And the reaction will be an attack.
Yes, because if they perceived it as an attack as well.
Yes.
And I mean, just because they support one gentleman or one leader wholeheartedly, and like you said, once they attack that leader, you're inadvertently attacking them.
Oh, not inadvertent. It's direct.
They consider it as a direct attack, right?
It's direct.
There's something we're overlooking here, which is the fact that there's an admittance or an admission here to criminal liability on both sides, because they're saying, no, we won't apologize. So the apology becomes the core of the conversation. But really, we're overlooking the fact that, in essence, they're both admitting that, yes, there was violence from my side of the party and so on. But this has now become, as you say, maybe we've become so desensitized that we forget the violence and we lean more towards the politics that rides on that. So that now we're now discussing about who should apologize and who shouldn't.
Actually,
at the core of this, there's been violence.
I mean, consider, it's not even forgetting the violence. It's, as Eric put it, it's normalizing it. It's like bribery. It is assumed people will be bribed during an election. The issue now is how much. When the same Secretary General talks about, look, we lose money to slay queens, that's part of the conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, stop making
Stop
it
whining.
personal.
Yes.
If your money didn't produce the end result, all of us lose money in one way or the other.
On a daily basis.
So Nyeri does have a point. They're saying it is okay to spend money during an election. don't whine if you don't get what you wanted. By the same token, if you have a way in which you want to conduct your election and someone does it better than you, stop complaining.
Accept and move on.
Yes.
The accept and move on thing is actually a bad thing that we picked up as a country.
Coming from the same quarters of the people now who are actually making some noise.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to look at it, that's
Accept
how
and move on. This is how things are going to run.
It's a product we could actually export.
Accept and move on?
Around the globe.
Yes, we could.
Yes.
On very many fronts.
The problem, like if on this continent, there's an absence of just that little aspect of accepting and moving on. That's what causes this constant strife that people have. Someone doesn't want to move, like in Latin America, okay, Chile. The president has had to take off, okay? Certain facts, had he accepted certain facts and moved on,
he'd be safe.
He would be in his own country.
Accept and move on.
Yes. But he didn't. He didn't. You see, if the acceptance and moved on dictum wasn't available in Kenya, the handshake would not have been possible.
Is that the reason why you also think the security forces and IEBC as well have not taken any action to what has happened? Is it because of that? Is it because we have normalized it?
According to the law,
as long as nobody has really made so much noise,
not even so much noise, pass. Who has gone to the police?
What happened?
Let it just pass.
No, who has gone to the
police?
For
example, the video that we saw the other day, which we made reference to, of this young man who was being assaulted by 4 members of police, it was clear, that was obvious. People made noise, it made its round on social media. A complaint was then even furthered and made to police. Then they are now
action was
taken because a complaint was made, a report was made, and then pushed forward. Somebody did something. In this case, we're just talking. All the talk is in the clouds for now, and a demand for apology is being made to whom? To God in heaven. If you have instruments that are going to be able to push your agenda, go to them. Plead your case. This and this and this happened
to me
at a certain time, certain place. Such witnesses come forward. They also lay their case. You have departments, you have agencies who have been given the mandate to do it. Go to them and let them do it. Should you then not feel comfortable, or you don't feel that it warrants you to go to them, accept it.
And if you feel really,
but also,
really
you see,
aggrieved, go to court.
The DPP,
it's paying you too much. Go to court.
The DPP picks a lot of cases, for example, from social media, from what he sees has been reported by people on social media. This has happened. He says, "Wait, I have instructed the DCI to conduct an investigation into this particular instance."
Has he done so in this case?
In this particular case, he has said, "We are going to see whether we can investigate." You see, action not taken. Because we have normalized, I mean, it's a political campaign. This happened in a political campaign. The case of JKUAT, even if there had been no actual formal complaint lodged with the police, action would have been taken. Why? Because of the public outcry. Because the public would have actually forced the police, if not the Inspector General of Police, then the IPOA itself, the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, would have taken action and said, wait, we have seen this.
So now let me help you. In this case, those elements that you've mentioned and talked about in Kibra, there has been no public outcry. There has been no runs on social media.
No.
People have not been making noise.
Which one?
Where?
What do you mean there's no public?
Which
public?
one? Tell us
so we can be informed. Who? Where?
You have reported it. So we have a clip here we've played. William Ruto has complained, the deputy president.
Because he said he is public.
Oh, no, wait.
He is the public.
Didmas Marasa. The issue has actually
2 of them now are public.
The issue has been canvassed.
Census just came out to 47 million people.
There has been a
2
hashtag.
people complained and it's public.
There has been a hashtag on social media about the violence in Kibra.
Created by
It has been there.
Created by
Kenyans on social media.
By 2 Kenyans?
Not 2 Kenyans.
Who now?
Very many Kenyans have participated in this conversation. The same way.
So there has been public. So what you're saying now, essentially, that there has been public outcry, and the DP has ignored public outcry, and has decided the DPP has ignored public outcry and has not listened to the demands or cries of Kenyans and decided to ask for investigations to be done. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, he has not commenced investigations.
I think what Eric is trying to tell you, the threshold for public outcry is 1.
1 person.
Just
and that's
public. 1 person, public. And if they are really important, then they represent an even bigger public.
2.
The threshold is when you see something has happened, you can see something has happened. You actually initiate an investigation.
So why have they not gone now? They should go.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Because
we have that's serious.
We have normalized. If it's happening in a political contest, it's normal. Why are you complaining? The same thing that say. Why are you complaining? It's normal.
Rhetoric has come back to bite some political individuals.
Yeah.
if they can't take it to court, as has been suggested in the past, they should just accept
and move on.
Move on.
Yes.
This is the conversation. It's Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room. The conversation continues as well. Facebook, Spice of MKE. Twitter hashtag is the Situation Room. It's 18 minutes past 9.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. In the room, we have Eric Latif, Nduoko, CT Muga, and Nyeri Thorne. CT.
Everything we've been discussing here hinges on one very key component to any debate that takes place in a country. It's called the court of public opinion. It's an arena where decisions are made, cases are actually tried. If I had to ask the question from our audience this morning, and even from you, my fellow and esteemed panelists, co-hosts, okay, does any of you know of somebody by the name of Jane Muthoni?
There must be many.
All right. Does
I
anybody know the name of? Yes, I'm not talking about your relatives. I'm talking about someone who isn't your relative, Eric. Do you know of somebody by the name of Solomon Buthi?
No.
You wouldn't. Okay, but if I were to ask the question, do you know someone by the name of Toby Cohen?
Yes.
Was named, okay? Sarah Wairimu?
Yes.
These two groups of people have something in common. Both were married to each other at some point. And in each of these cases, the man in this marriage is dead. And there is a case involving murder. And there is one significant male in this case. Now, the husband in both of these cases died under circumstances that are being considered as murder. And the first person who has a finger has been pointed at and who has been asked to explain has been the wife. And each of these cases, there is a significant individual, male, who is also involved in this particular case.
A second male.
Each of these cases has a male who has been involved and who is considered to have played a key role in the passing away of the husband of these women.
Mm-hmm.
One case has received so much attention that everyone knows about it. To the point where this gentleman who passed away, Toby Cohen, was referred to as a billionaire. The question that I kept asking is, when someone is a billionaire, there must be some activity this person is involved in that generates billions, isn't it? Nobody asked the question, what does he actually do to generate this billion? I was told he's involved in some golfing business. And I left it at that. Now, the two individuals that I also spoke of, one, Mr. Solomon Buthi and Jane Muthoni, were both head teachers of schools. The schools were in Murang'a.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the husband died. The wife has been implicated. As we speak, she's incarcerated at the facility that the government offers for such issues, the Nakuru GK prison.
Nakuru.
Yes. They've been incarcerated as they are awaiting the furtherance of this particular case. But this case, or these cases, have been tried in the media. Wairimu, from everything that one read in the papers, had been found guilty even before the courts actually even started commenting. In the case of Jane Muthoni, it's the same. So somehow, because these cases have been presented in the media, these women have actually been found guilty. Now, I'll pause there for a second. There was a lady by the name of Mother. She actually did a lot of work in the Dandora area. And she was affiliated. She was known. She died under the circumstances. They said, well, it was an abortion gone wrong. It was in that particular context. But the husband was fingers pointed to the husband. There was a case of a media personality, again, who passed away. Again, the husband was called in for questioning. Media presence, tried in the media, but not as much as the cases where it is alleged that it is the women they feel was responsible for the murder or the passing away of the husband.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's this role the media seems to play in ensuring that they further this particular sequence of events. Before that, we had a very interesting case, and this one we spoke about because we wondered and asked loudly why. A certain senator and a certain lady who were, from what we read, married. There was a falling out in the marriage. We were treated to detailed accounts of their lives consecutively in the media. It was even headlines. So to the point where you asked, why are these are clearly personal issues. Why is it that they are at the helm? Why must we listen to all this? Why is it the most important thing? Now, this isn't a phenomenon that's new to Kenya. Other parts of the world have had their cases. In America, it usually happens when there's a president they want to impeach. Well, they've had impeachment cases. I think this one about Trump, I think, is the fourth. But the really popular one were two. One involved somebody called Bill Clinton. And there was an issue of some improper association he had with a young lady. And it brought to debate very many issues. The key was what can be defined as sex. It was the issue because the claim was he didn't have sex. So they had to debate it because this was the issue on which whoever the people wanted to impeach him. Yes, precisely. Argument. Yes, but before that, there was another personality in the States called Bill Cosby. A personality that was known across the world, TV program. And then there were a string of women who came forth and said, this man actually raped us. Again, the media went into a frenzy. Before that, there was a gentleman called O.J. Simpson. There are those who argue these people are black. Bill Clinton wasn't black. Okay? But again, the media went into a frenzy. So the debate here is, at what point is it just reporting, and at what point
are you prosecuting?
Yes, exactly. At what point has the court taken over the prosecutorial processes of our courts, and they're actually treating us to a case that the public can now decide on the rights and wrongs of?
But if you look at how the cases are reported in the media, is the media leading the audience to a certain conclusion, or is the media merely reporting what has basically happened?
You see,
for example, in the case of the Moranga teachers, right? So what was reported? Was it that man dead, woman arrested, woman taken to court, and this is what has been presented in court by the prosecution, and this is what the defense is saying?
And some individuals who had been contracted to carry this out came out and said, we were paid.
We were paid.
And
someone comes and claims that they
claimed they were paid. Okay. The problem of these courts of public opinion is that what is actually on trial is a presumption of innocence. So, if you look at it, the public deems you guilty by whatever means they use, but you start off from the position that you are guilty. Now it's up to you to actually prove that you're innocent.
And actually, immediately, it's interesting that you say that, because it's almost as though as soon as a name is mentioned and it has been linked to a particular crime that has taken place, the individual who has been arrested immediately, without even finding out the facts or even seeing what they look like, that individual has been deemed guilty immediately.
The tag lives with them as well.
Oh yes, absolutely. And even if it were to go through a process and this person was found then innocent later, in the minds of the court of public opinion, that person remains guilty.
And why the media's participation is important is because that the case exists is not in dispute. Now, how it is presented, how it is framed, how it is structured, the wording used, the language, all these. Now, that's where the media comes. Because now the media now highlights it. And that highlighting sometimes takes a bias, a clear bias.
Inadvertently.
Sometimes that's the question. I wonder if it's inadvertent. If it's inadvertent, that you're saying the reporters are incompetent.
Because you're just reporting. You're basically reporting that so and so. You see, the accused, there's no way the person who's not accused can be deemed guilty by the public.
But even the journalist.
Hold on, Jerry. Something. Go on.
Even the journalists themselves, they're not immune to sort of having biases. So, for instance, with the recent cases with Cohen and the Muthoni cases that you mentioned, where their husbands were killed, these are Kikuyu women, and we know sort of, I'll call it rhetoric, or
it is rhetoric.
The rhetoric behind that. That no journalist is immune to biases. They'll be unconscious and they'll be influenced by this when they're writing a story. But also, I think it's much more exciting and riveting, and it sort of grips the nation when somebody's said to be guilty. The media can paint this differently and try and paint the innocence of the accused. But it's more riveting stuff, and the media wants to sell, isn't it? So they'll give more ink to the fact that he's guilty.
There are two sides.
Absolutely.
There
As to
must be a
whether,
victim
I think
here
the question
and
should be, does this
perpetrator.
then influence the judges? Do the judges then feel under pressure to rule in favor of what the public has then been pushed to believe or influenced to believe? That's when it actually becomes dangerous. So the burden, of course, of proof still lies in the prosecution from a legal perspective. Of course, from what we're talking about, public opinion, the burden of proof, even after the court case, even after somebody is proven guilty, rather,
or declared innocent.
Declared innocent. Oh, still innocent. But the burden of proof, yes, it's true. It's actually on the accused, because public opinion, we tend to be accusatory for some reason. It seems to be our default position, and we enjoy those stories. I don't know whether this in itself is a bias to assume that somebody's guilty, especially if the media is pushing it. We've got a lot of belief in the media.
The media allows individuals to play out their own personal biases. I believe this is what you're saying. And if you look at it, why the media is culpable here is this. They have a platform from which they can actually set the agenda. And because they're in the media, they even understand what you call social desirability. They know, they have an idea of what they would like. So the framing comes into account. Now, where this to me rings some very serious alarm bells, they move from the agenda of simply reporting to the agenda of propaganda. That's where it becomes serious.
Or shaping opinions.
Yes, exactly.
But is anything void of this bias? Can they report absolutely neutrally? Is there any individual who is void of these external influences, even as a journalist?
Often
can they
think about it? You are a writer, and you've written political opinions. There are biases, but even with our biases, and I have biases, as do we all, you will try and balance it. So the reader is given an opportunity to read or to understand the bias. This isn't what I'm talking about. The bias is actually useful. In fact, many media houses are actually published with a bias.
Yes.
They have this particular view. They are socialist, they are capitalist, they are free for all, they are green. They have a clear bias as to what it is that they want to promote. This is not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to when there is, the word here I'm going to use is manipulation of those facts to actually change mass thinking. You then create what you call mass bias. Okay? Now that mass bias, in our case, it becomes dangerous in a political setting.
It's, and you're right about these manipulations by the media. They'll omit certain facts that could actually give the reader a bigger picture and a better understanding in forming a judgment. Or what they'll do is they'll report more on facts that perhaps suggest the person is guilty and not give the full picture. So, they do lean towards painting a picture of guilt. And I'm thinking of myself here whenever I've read something, other than the fact that I know that there's always two sides, no matter how thin you slice it. It's clear here that
you tend to go to what you're reading is what you're consuming, and you form your bias alongside that.
I do, and I imagine the less discerning reader, not to say that I'm the discerning one, but I imagine somebody who's just consuming news without being critical of it or the angle of it would tend to think most of these reports, the people are guilty.
Does the same apply, for example, in a community where there has been a crime committed and somebody has been taken and accused, and it hasn't been reported in the media, but a public opinion in that case, the community is looking at this person and thinking you are guilty, or we're thinking this person has been incarcerated wrongfully and they did not commit it?
Are we going into the hour?
We're going into the traffic.
Okay,
Take
let's
a
go
look
into
at
the
traffic and then
traffic.
come back.
I wish to say yes.
All right. It's a situation room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Out of the traffic, we'll open up the phone lines 0719 012 600. Good morning.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
So, as is the situation right now, wherever you find a roundabout, you're going to find traffic this morning. And everywhere in the city that there's a roundabout, that's where the traffic is. unfortunately. So coming off Thika Road, Wayaki Way, Langata Road, Ngong Road, Mombasa Road, wherever it is that you want to join to another major road and you have to find a roundabout to do that, you're going to get stuck. Heavens are being thanked for the fact that the one at Westlands has been closed after it being open for 2 days because it brought a whole lot of congestion that nobody wanted to contend with. Kura's been asked to wake up. Let's see what happens tomorrow. 0719 600 is the number to call if you find an alternate route that people can use to get into the city. Getting into the city today is proving to be a very, very serious problem. Sit tight while you do.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
If we take an example of, say, our beloved country, Kenya, and some of the well-cherished perspectives that we have, communities in this country have generalized perspectives of other communities. They'll say, this community, they are this. The other community, they are this. And if we allow them to come into power, this will happen. Now, I can even understand how it begins because most of us go to school in areas where the people we come in contact with, in touch with, the people who speak our language, we have many commonalities. But that leap from, I don't quite understand these people because I'm not used to them, to the point where these people are actually dangerous and they are harmful to us. And yet, if you are to ask someone, but these people you speak of, how many of them, if I may use the word them, do you know of? Not a very positive answer. Okay, these individuals or this group of people, how many of them have caused you harm? Again, none. But the view is held and it's held fast. Now, politicians play an extremely important role in this, and the media, the cheerleaders, because they come in and they chime in and they support it. So you then have a mass bias. People have these views that they hold strongly to, and it's not a Kenyan construct. I'm sure you'll tell me that in Nigeria, you will talk to one community, tell you these people, they are, and then they'll rattle off. They don't rattle off positive things. It's usually a whole litany of extremely negative things. One question: have you met any such people? And not really, but I know now. They haven't met them, but they know. So it moves from the realm of speculation to fact in their minds. No supporting evidence for them, but that is what they've come to believe. So it's not, for them, it's not even a myth. It's reality.
It's a reality.
Now, this is what happens when you have rhetoric that sort of like is allowed to, this one is to grow, it isn't organic because it's really wind assisted, to the point where the propaganda now becomes a reality. This is brought about to the fore in situations where there's conflict. We see it in war situations. We see in places where there's continuous unrest. This narrative I'm speaking of, or these narratives, thrive in such an environment. But we are not at war in this country. We're just politicking, but our politicians seems to want to make our politicking into war. I believe that whether it's the BBI or the Punguza Mzigo, the Ugatuzi initiative, if I'm to listen to what they have said, and if I'm to talk about the summaries about the initiative that I have read, they all seem to agree that you must have a situation where our political understanding doesn't get us to the point where this sort of situation is exacerbated. Now, they may differ and to the method how you want it. One wants to reduce this, one wants to increase the other, but they seem to be talking about the same thing, which means they have understood.
Yes.
But being politicians, will they actually do what is required?
They may not. As long as it doesn't work in their favor. So they may agree at the beginning, but then they realize, okay, so it's working to my disadvantage
now
and to the advantage of my opponent.
Given that the power that we as the media have, how do you ensure that you play a role as the fourth estate and you bring about the amount of pressure? If we can excite and make people this happy, please, if there's a call, let them come in.
Not yet.
Okay.
0719-012-600 is a phone line to call in.
Yes. If we can excite the public, if we can inform them, we have the power to ensure that the very thing that we are saying cannot be done can be done. Because if the media can treat people to the individual happenings of people's life to the degree where nothing fills your life other than this, why not something that actually helps people and helps the nation? It can be done, but then I'll be told it doesn't sell.
Yeah.
Why don't you make it sell?
How do you make it sell?
Well, look at it this way. Think of a boring subject, a completely boring subject, and think of how do you get people to take an interest in it. Before HIV and AIDS became, did we call it a national disaster?
Yes.
Yes. Before it came, has the flooding been named a national disaster yet?
Not yet.
Not yet, actually.
Okay, so enough people haven't died yet. Okay. Okay.
Neither has cancer.
Neither. Okay, let's talk about the cancer story. So long as you're just churning out numbers, 30%, 20%, people likely will not get it. If you want people to understand stories of that nature, talk about individual lives and talk about the places they come from and make sure they're representative of this country. And talk about the demographics of people in that age group who will actually have passed away because this matter of cancer has not been addressed. Talk about the men, the young men, the women, the children. Talk about and let individual stories come out. People then relate to cancer. If you just throw numbers, you're throwing numbers against malaria. You're throwing numbers against accidents. You're throwing numbers. It's numbers. People don't relate well to numbers. But they relate well to human stories, stories of individuals.
Those have been told, CT.
You can tell it some more.
Those ones are being told, and not to say that that cancer, for example, is a boring story. But you see, those ones are told, and then you have also to look at it. How do you balance it to bring in the policy side of it, and the policy side of it now becomes the boring side of it.
No, even policy can be made exciting.
If you just say that you're reporting it directly.
It's interesting to note that once you show people the side which touches them directly, they're more likely to pick up on it, and I think with everything that we see, however it affects us, whether it affects people close to us, once you show me that it does or it can affect me in one way or another, I'm likely to pick up on it a little bit more, as opposed to something that is vague, amorphous out there. I don't really know how it affects me, but once it affects me, my business, those around me, then you're likely to take more interest in it. And I think that there's a way in which we can craft things, not lie or change the story or change the narrative to fit, but craft things or craft information, craft stories so that they can actually touch on how it affects you and I.
Let me give Eric an example.
Human interest angle.
When you talk about, say, unintended pregnancies, teenage, adolescents, numbers, broad figures. If you say Form 2 students who have just done this, who anticipates that they wanted to become A, B, C, D, and whose dreams were this. You're telling a story here. Same thing. Suddenly, people can relate because you have a daughter, you have a niece, you have a cousin, you have a what. But just preteen, there are ways of, you can actually, you have to make people relate to the story that you're telling them. Yeah. That's why propagandists are good at what they do. That's what they do.
Because they craft the stories that
yes,
way.
They appeal to your emotion. Emotion. Not your logic. Logic, you'll argue it out. Emotion, you will react. Anytime you hear of genocide, in our backyard here, our neighbors, that was propaganda. They say the simplest of things. You profile, you dehumanize the person, so the killing of them stops.
Over time.
Yes, the killing doesn't become a big thing. It's like you're exterminating some vermin. That's what it is. So that's why when people start profiling people and calling them names, it started happening here during those early tribal clashes. You are setting the stage for something really dangerous. It was propaganda. People would kill neighbors. Let's leave Rwanda for a moment. Let's go to Bosnia. Let's go to the issues that were in that particular part of the country. They didn't have to look far. I'm giving the example of Rwanda. It was the neighbors. When we had our issues in 2007, it wasn't people who... It was people you even knew.
People that you knew.
You've grown up with them.
That was what was most surprising and shocking. Now, that's what propaganda does. Now, the media helps fund this. It may be inadvertent, but they do. So if people are to be blamed and taken to court and people have to be criminalized, so should we.
Let's bring it back to what you were raising, the issue of a court of public opinion.
Yes.
And of course, taking up like what is reported in court. So you've got two people and the law presupposes that this person is innocent until they've gone through the entire process and found guilty and deemed guilty. But then you're saying that in the court of public opinion, based on the information that comes out to the public, the opinion is sort of swayed to show that this person is actually guilty, and we consider them guilty before they're even declared guilty.
Yes.
What did you say? Should we actually say that such cases should not be reported?
Oh no, they should be.
Yeah, no,
they
no,
should
no. In
be.
the UK, you have the contempt of court regulations, and they restrict media's reporting of legal proceedings after a person has been formally arrested. Of course, there's also the doctrine in law that justice must be seen to be done. So you can go and watch the proceedings yourself and decide for yourself. But after somebody has actually been formally charged,
No discussion.
then the media cannot report on it until after the conviction.
For all cases?
For
is it for certain cases?
For criminal cases, you'll find this is the case. For things like family cases where children are involved, you can't even go and watch the proceedings. So there is that mantra or that overriding maxim that justice must be seen to be done. But having said that, you need to protect the individual because everybody has a right to a fair trial. So what you don't want is court of public opinion and swaying even the jury as well. And sometimes the jury is even locked up and not allowed out so that they're not privy to conversations and hearsay. Absolutely. So, judges aren't immune, or the jury isn't immune to influence, outside influences. And the media has to be very careful. But from a very basic perspective, whenever we're given these cases, these recent ones of Cohen and what was the other one?
Jane Muthoni.
Because we're not given an alternative as to who the other murderer could be, our natural our default position is just to assume this must be the murderer. If we were given a set of alternatives as to who it could be,
so and so,
it could be so and so. So what tends to happen is the media is not reporting everything fully. There's a number of people who have been charged with the Cohen murder. Of course, what's more interesting is when it's a spouse that sells more. It's sort of tugs at the hearts and minds at the strings of the hearts more than sort of saying it was a work colleague and things went wrong. So there is that scandal as well that they try and sell.
Should we take up that UK route? And what was it that informed the UK route? Basically, the courts were gagging the media, and that's it, right?
Experience usually. I mean, ask yourself, for instance, you've heard of the term a lynch mob, mob mentality. Why is it that when someone shouts Mwizi in this country, the likelihood of dying is very, very high?
It's immediate.
Because people have experienced it and it's been uncomfortable. Your wallet was pickpocketed and you lost documents. So you don't think immediately someone who represents some great discomfort that you actually underwent has been... You don't ask if it's true or not. You want to participate in ensuring that this person meets justice. And justice is usually in the form of huge boulders and rocks being hurled at this individual.
0719 012 Let's now open up the phone lines. It's 9:45.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
For 14 minutes to 10 o'clock. This unverified news by Ndu. Give us.
Sorry.
Look, okay, yeah, at this point it's unverified and maybe it can be verified for us, but apparently the flooding has been quite serious and that we have 2 crocodiles in the middle of the road in Feather, and cars have come to a standstill because of this, and so I guess it's a bit of a situation right now. Crocodiles.
From where?
Okay, what happened to the lions in Nairobi National Park?
They're still there. Now we have crocodiles. The flooding. The road has been turned to a river.
Which river around
the
Nairobi
Feather River,
has...
clearly. Because of the flooding and the roads are so bad that it's actually a swamp. It's not a road anymore. It's now a swamp and the crocodiles have made it
crocodiles happen. From... Anyway, back to the... So let's if actually you are there and you've seen the crocodiles and...
Take a picture, send us.
Yes, and in fact, call us in. And let's talk to the crocodile. Patia crocodile, Simo. 0719 012 We are talking about the court of public opinion. And Nyeri has given us a case, actually, where in the UK, once somebody has been taken to court and charged,
once they've been officially charged,
when they're charged, the media is then not allowed to report on the case
until it's concluded.
Until conclusion, where you come and say this is the result of that case.
But you are allowed to go and watch the case. The courts are open to the public because, of course, justice must be seen to be done. So
what
you can
informed
go and
that decision?
It would have been public policy. I don't know what the basis of it is, but it's for reasons that we're discussing today. You want somebody to have a right to a fair trial, and I'm sure jurors and the judiciary there would have realized that the media can interfere with somebody's right to a fair trial, which is an absolute right. It's not, it has no limitations. So they must have realized that actually you can sway not just the public's opinion, but there's a jury system, and the jury is members of the public, and they're there to decide on whether something is true or not even the legality of something. So it's, they're just as susceptible to this influence that the media has over the general public, because they're members of the general public, and you want somebody to have had a fair trial.
Criminal cases, for example, would be murder, would be theft, would be corruption, right? So we're saying that in a case where somebody has been taken to court, let's say a CS for Treasury has been taken to court, once they are formally charged, that case ends. We don't
No. There's sort of public cases of public interest. So if somebody is a minister and it's to do with his docket, then of course the public also has a right, under the tenets of democracy and instruments such as transparency and so on. But in criminal cases, once an individual is officially charged, then yes, there's restrictions as to the reporting. This is in the UK, and newspapers such as the Mirror have been actually prosecuted under contempt of court with such restrictions.
That is to limit the activity in the public domain, the influences you speak of, because if they're restricted from reporting, then they cannot report. And if you don't report, it can't be read, so the influence is actually restricted.
So you're removing this case from the community and taking it into the confines of the
court. No, you can actually go and attend it. It's just that you are not going to report this thing. You will not report it at that point in time. Remember, the court of public opinion thrives on what they receive, remember? And we're saying that the media is principally responsible for this, because they're the ones who do. Who else does the reporting?
They're the feeders of the information at the end of the day. So, I mean, there really is has not been established as another source of where this information is gotten from. And so it's the media that gives out this information, and that's where they're able to make the analyses from. They pick up on what has been reported, and then from that, and also from the analysis that's done, then their opinions are then formed, and then they're able to then voice from there.
There are those that argues that, when a case is in court, actually you're only required to report what is proceeding in court, right? So if you come out and you're reporting what is actually being reported in court, what's wrong with that? As long as you're saying this is what the prosecution has said, this is what the defense is saying, this is what the witnesses are saying, this is what the judge ruled. You see, already
with trial by media, a lot of the information that the media gets is from the prosecution and the police.
Yes.
And this is why it will be skewed towards a guilty verdict in the mind of the reader. In the first instance, because very rarely the defense, usually, if you've noticed with the Cohen case, the defense has actually said very little about the Cohen's widow. Her name is Wairimo. The defense has said very little, because also they don't want to expose maybe what their defense is and so on. This is a lawyer, it's a strategist. This is the only person who can speak officially on behalf of the accused. Whereas if you look at the prosecution, you've got the DPP, you've got the police, you've got the investigators. These are the people who the media will go to for information, because the defense, other than the legal defense, the lawyer, there's not many people to speak to. I mean, the friends, they'll be biased and they'll come out and say she's a lovely person, try and give a character witness of the person, and the media is not going to buy that. So that's one of the reasons it's skewed towards guilt, because the media will get most of its information from the police and the prosecutors, who of course are trying to
before the person is charged in court, right?
I'm talking about generally why the media.
When the case is ongoing, you're receiving your information actually from the prosecution in court, because the prosecution starts off the case, and then also you receive information from the witness, the prosecution witnesses, the defense, the defense case, the defense witnesses. So basically, you're picking this from the judicial process as it's going on.
Absolutely, but you can get more information from the police. Police are willing to speak to you. Investigators are willing to speak to you. The defense isn't as willing to speak to you, and there's not many sort of individual people in the defense other than the lawyer. in the prosecution, you have the prosecutors, you have the police, you have the investigators, you have the accusers, and the family. Remember also, we have a victim mentality. So if there's somebody who's been aggrieved, or if it's a crime, if it's a murder, somebody who's been killed, we do tend to empathize with that family, and that in turn actually turns us against whoever might be accused, whether they're guilty or not. So some of these biases, they create a default position whereby we as human beings, because we empathize or sympathize even with the victim, we start to dislike, or we have some sort of the likability factor for the accused disappears. So they're not starting on an equal footing.
There's a term Jerry has used here, trial by media, because if you allow that reporting, remember, the reporting is done by a reporter, and some element of bias will come in. They don't just state facts. Remember, this is reporting. You assume that reporting just involves stating facts. No, reporting involves even commenting on these things. The moment you're commenting, analyzing it, you are already involved in the process of trial. And every media house has an agenda. Every media house has a way in which they frame their things. So already, again, you've introduced a bias into it.
But if there's an open bias, and if for a case that's ongoing in court, then the other party in court will stand up, and it has happened before.
Yes.
Will stand up
Yes.
and lodge a complaint.
Yes, but
And this is where the judge actually says, or the magistrate, whoever is in charge of this court, will rise up and say, no. You, for this particular reason, this media house, I punish you by going this far.
But Eric, the
In
harm
some
will have been
cases,
done.
even gagging them.
The harm
It's
will have
already
been
done.
done.
The information is out there already, and people then can now use it and then form opinions about what
You
was
don't want
said
any of
already.
that to take place.
Yeah.
You can come and watch if you like. You just can't report it. That's it. Come, watch, see. But that's just it. Look, trial by media is, the term, it was coined, what, in this century or the previous one? This one.
Late 20th and 21st.
Yes, it's a very apt term.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, if you look at the reach that, look, a courthouse is just a courthouse, isn't it? Look at the reach that the media has. This is one case, it's being tried in Nairobi. When the media gets hold of it, the entire country gets involved in what is going on.
And
Entire.
beyond the borders,
Yes.
absolutely. Beyond borders too.
Yes.
And if anybody who would have any interest in terms of picking it up and what is happening,
Yes.
it has the
Look,
potential to reach
the
far beyond
the other day,
just the people within
this
that
same
court.
issue, the Cohen Wairimu issues, one of the things that came up in court is that Wairimu, according to the reporting, denied the husband sex for 3 years.
How does that?
It's
Is
a-
that? It's neither
yes, and I
here
read
nor
and I
there.
said, okay.
And in a patriarchal society,
Yes.
already you can see what
Yes.
sort of emotions that would conjure.
Yes.
First of all, it's a difficult woman. She was making him suffer. And with that, then
And that's how you see. Then it's
the
easy
sort
for
of
her
the
to
accusation of guilt seems to make sense. It follows. So a lot of fallacies also sort of start to form as well because of that reasoning. And as I say, unless you're a discerning reader, and usually when you're consuming information such as this, it's exciting. You're not going to go, as the average reader, you're not going to go into much detail unless you're a lawyer and you can see through the cracks. Generally speaking, you'll accept things for what they are, and your biases will come into play.
In that statement, we've seen a bias. If you are a lawyer, assuming that it's only lawyers who have the capacity to
No,
be
it
discerning
isn't.
the cracks. No. I am actually, what she said didn't mean that. I am actually bringing it up as an example to demonstrate bias. That's what
No, that's not a bias. That's a fact. That lawyers will be able to see through legal absurdities a lot faster, or legal cracks, or legal issues.
They will.
Than the layman.
layperson.
Of course, it's in their training. This is their profession. This is what they do. But then look at it from the other side. The other case where somebody has been, wrongfully prosecuted, and sort of what is being reported is actually helping to protect them and protect their reputation.
So that the media
In
is
public
reporting on their innocence. That's a very, very rare occurrence, generally speaking, because as you've heard the phrase that the media will never report a plane landing safely. It's not something people want to read or hear about.
But if somebody has been arrested and taken to court unfairly and unjustly, there's already somebody on the other side. So there's a victim. In both cases, we have a case of a victim and a perpetrator. So in this particular one, you're actually painting the other side as a perpetrator and the person who's in the dock as a victim. as opposed to the other way around, where you're seeing the system is basically prosecuting this particular individual called Nyeri. And so by having that being beamed to the public, you're actually helping to protect Nyeri's innocence in this particular instance.
By reporting the failings of
by reporting just basically what's happening in court, where it becomes very obvious that, well, these, first of all, what time did they arrive in court? How long? What was the prosecution saying? The prosecution was saying, we are not ready. We want to incarcerate this person for a further 21 days.
The question is the media willing to report this? Generally speaking, the media wants to paint a picture that the person is guilty. That is 90% of the time you find that. I have seen the media go into jails. I've seen KTN do actual documentaries, and they've gone into a prison and spoken to somebody and tried to paint them in better light and suggest maybe that the court proceedings or they didn't have a fair trial. Exactly. So the media does play that role. But in an actual case as it's going on, generally speaking, the media will paint the person as guilty before proven innocent.
We're coming to the end of the show, so the conversation continues. Who wants to take that today? The conversation. Say it, City.
This conversation, as you can see, is continuing. But as we are going to take, each of us is going to take responsibility, then we as the media, we must take responsibility of ensuring that we actually inform our listeners, we inform our readers in the most balanced way we possibly and humanly can.
Yeah, and of course the media, the idea of follow-through also is important. So when we get a piece of a story, some new evidence perhaps has been unearthed, and we find that evidence not to be incriminating, you'll find the media doesn't report the fact that that evidence wasn't incriminating. So this is how the media gets it wrong when reporting criminal cases.
Inauma, lakini inabidi uzoe.
Okay.
Accept and move on.
There you go.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. This is The Situation. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Of course, between now and 3 o'clock, you'll be having uninterrupted music, sugar and spice and everything nice. Monique joins you to take you home on Spice Drive from 3 to 7 and then 7 to 10. You have the adults in the room. See you again tomorrow. Good morning. It's 10 o'clock.